No. What? Okay, I'm back again. Hopefully, a little bit more together than earlier. I don't know. I think I was doing all right. I can't. It's all a blur. It's all a blur. All right. So let me see if I can get back in here. Duke it out. And I hope this time the girls show up. Where's Go Go Girl? Miss you. And Galway Gal. I'm a lonely guy. Yeah. All right, let's see. And I'm also thinking. Of a music change. It's ominous. The coffee cup handle got really hot in the microwave. 3 deathmatch tickets. I'm going for it. Stand back. Stop the women lag. We're holding it. We go back. I think I need. I've got a lock here. Yeah. Stop learning like. See, that's when I had that secret desire to shake hands with Stop Learning Live. Where are the girls? I don't have any lag. That's fine. Papi di Figaro. Figaro. Now what are these guys doing all the way up here? They could shoot me. Keep them down. Oh, here comes Stop Blaming the Light. He's not gonna make it though. Well, I don't think I have anything to say about it. That's awesome. Go rematerialize itself. And I will not blame the lag. You don't have to get angry.
They didn't do any physical harm to the white-haired old man, but they so wounded his sensibilities that he took to his bed, and a few days later died quietly in his sleep. Quietly in his sleep. But his spirit lived on in Lanny Bud. All the boy's life he would remember what the grave old scholar had told him about the love of books. This was something that no misfortune or sorrow could take from a man, and its possessor had a refuge from all the evils of the world. Montesquieu had said that to love reading was to exchange hours of boredom for hours of delight. Layard had said that a book is a friend that never deceives. The librarian of Les Fortiers had advised Lanny to seek the friendship of the French classic authors and let them teach him dignity, grace, and perfection of form. Now misfortune and sorrow had come. Love had dallied with Lanny Bud for a while and then tossed him away. The crisis found him without companionship, because Jerry Pendleton had come to an arrangement with his belle Annie to wait for him, and had gone back to Kansas to complete his education. In this plight Lanny sought the friendship of one Jean Racine, who had died more than 200 years previously but lived on by the magic of the printed page. He took disordered emotions and converted them into well-made dramas, in which exalted beings stalked the scene and poured out their sufferings in verses so eloquent that the youth of 16 was moved to seek lonely places by the sea or in the forest and declaim them to Tritons or Hamadryads. Also Lanny won the friendship of a severe and stern spirit by the name of Pierre Corneille, who had made over the French theater, and had had no easy time of it in his life. The aristocratic personages who had sprung from his brain, full panopled in pride and owing fealty to duty alone, reminded a sensitive youth that the life of man had never been easy, and that fate appeared to have other purposes than to feed pleasure to avid lips. Since one had to die sooner or later, let it be magnificently, to the accompaniment of verses that had the sweep of an orchestra. Jesus Dune, il est dry. Mais o est bien NS. While valor not 10 point le number des NS. After Lanny had read Lawson and Horace inside, he remembered the great hours he had spent among the Isles of Greece, and that these people also could be had in friendship by the magic of the holy word. And Freddy had told him about Sophocles, and Lanny got a French translation of the 7 plays and read them aloud to his stepfather. Together they indulged in more speculation about the Greek view of life, which had begun with the worship of sensuous beauty and ended with a confrontation of dreadful and inexplicable doom. For what had just gained people been brought into being on those bright and sunny shores, to leave behind them only broken hearted poems, and a few thousand melodious verses of longing proud resignation and despair. As a result of these influences, encountered at the most impressionable age, Lanny Bud became conservative in his taste in the arts. He liked a writer to have something to say, and to say it with clarity and precision. He liked a musician to reveal his ideas in music, and not in program notes. He liked a painter to produce works that bore some resemblance to something. He disliked loud noises and confusion, and obscurity cultivated as a form of exclusiveness. All of which meant that Lanny was out of date before he had got fairly started in life. Aye. Inspired by sublime examples, the painter gave his stepson useful advice concerning love. It was good to do with it, but also good to be able to do without it. In this, as in other affairs, one must be master of oneself. There were 1,000 reasons why love might fail, and one must have resources within and be able to meet the shocks of fate. Lanny looked at Marcel spoke with authority this lover who had had to leave his love and go to war. This worshipper of beauty who now had to speak through a veil in order that his friends might not see his ugliness. When Marcel said that Lanny too might someday he recalled that would take him away from music and darken to a memory trouble in the depths of soul. Lanny talked about these problems of love and happiness with his mother also. Strict moralists might have been shocked that Camille was ready to know about her son's too early entanglement, and to sanction it. But of course had this conversation, that when the youth was in trouble, now or later, he came to her and had the benefit of her experience. She tried now to explain to him things that she didn't understand very well herself. No, she didn't think that Rosemary was heartless. It It was evident that the girl had taken up the ideas of older women, who perhaps had suffered too much in a man's world, and had revolted from it and gone to extremes in the effort to protect themselves. Beauty told her son that kind and good people frequently had to suffer for those who were not so. Just so Kurt Meissner and other kind and good Germans might suffer for those cruel and arrogant ones who had dragged the nation into an awful calamity. That was another problem with which Lanny wrestled frequently. Was Europe really going to be another Greece, and destroy itself by internecine wars? Would travelers someday come to walk into Cannes, and see the remains of lovely villas like Benvedo and splendid palaces like Sepsiagnes, and dig in the ruins and speculate concerning the lives of those who had built them, and the hostile fate which had driven them upon a course of self-destruction? Lanny had written several times to Kurt, through the kind agency of the Jewish salesman of electrical gadgets, now engaged in buying from the United States such devices as magnetos for automobiles and airplanes, and reshipping them to Germany. Lanny wrote Kurt about the tenderness of Rosine and the stern pride of Cornelia and the moral solemnity of Sophocles. And Kurt replied that his friend was fortunate in being able to devote himself to these lofty themes. He, Kurt Meissner, was now taking practical duties, and soon would be engaged in what he considered the most important work in the world. Lanny had no difficulty in understanding that his German friend was going into the war, and didn't wish, or perhaps would be allowed, to say where or when or how. Lanny had to think of Kurt as fighting, and he had to do the same for Rick, who had finished his final year of school and was similar to his heart's desire. Ophocles is fine, wrote the English youth on a postcard, but I am reading the L-1 being the type of airplane the British were using. Rick didn't say where he was, but Rosemary had brought news about him, and Lanny knew that his friend was in touch with that Captain Finchley whom they had met at the review on Salisbury Plain, and was expecting to go to the camp which this officer now commanded. Lanny knew that the training was intensive and quick, for the need of the Allies for young flyers was desperate. A cousin of Rosemary's had been sent out after only some 20 hours of practice flying, and on his very first flight in France had been shot down by a German outfit. Kurt and Rick were going to fight each other. And suppose they were to meet up in the air. Lanny took upon himself the duty of serving, at least in his own thoughts, as mediator between these two. It was obvious that when such high-minded youths disagreed so bitterly, there must be truth on both sides and a middle ground where sooner or later they would have to meet. This cruel war must come to an end, and when it did, there would be need in a friend who could speak to both of them and bring them together again. Aye. No easy matter to keep an attitude, surrounded as Lanny was with persons whose hatred of Germans kept heating itself up like a furnace fire. Lanny would try to make a compromise by saying that the German rulers were wicked men, while the poor German people were deceived. But his mother said, no, they were a bloodthirsty race, they rejoiced in the infliction of suffering. You could never have got English sailors to send ships to the bottom and leave women and children to drown. Lanny saw that it was useless to argue. He went on playing the music of Mozart and Beethoven, who spoke directly to his soul. He knew they were not bloodthirsty, and neither were the people who had loved and cherished them and made them part of a national tradition. No, there was something wrong with the real thinking, and the young fellow's expanding mind kept trying to find out what it was. He wished very much that he might have the help of his father, whom he had not seen for 2 years. He was often tempted to write and ask Lana to come to him. But he remembered the deadly submarines lurking all about France and Britain, and he would write, and getting along okay, and we'll have a lot to talk about when this is over. Everybody was saying that it was bound to be over in a few months more. Never had wishes been father to so many thoughts. Each new offensive was going to be the final breakthrough. The Germans would be driven out of France, and the morale of the deceived people would crack. The German authorities kept saying the same thing, except that it was the French line that would crack, and Paris that would be taken. Both sides went on calling their young men, training them as fast as possible, and rushing them into the line. Manufacturing enormous quantities of shells and using them nerve-shaking bombardments to prepare for infantry attacks. The Battle of Ypres was opened by the British firing $110 million worth of ammunition. The Germans had offered poison gas as their contribution to the progress of military science. And now it was the British turn to have a new idea. Early in the war, an English officer had realized the impossibility of making infantry advances against machine guns, and had thought of some kind of steel fortress, heavy enough to be bulletproof, and moving on a caterpillar tread, so that it could go over shell holes and trenches. With a fleet of those to clean out machine gun nests, it might at last be possible to restore the art of movement. It was nearly a year before the British officer could get anything done about his idea. And when after another year it was tried, it wasn't tried thoroughly. There weren't enough tanks and they weren't used as he had planned. All of that was exactly with the picture of the British War Office which Robbie had sketched for his son long before the conflict started. Since Lanny couldn't talk about these matters with his father, he took Enlarge to the war as a substitute. This fine and sensitive old gentleman represented a nation which had maintained its freedom for 400 years in the heart of warring Europe. It was because of the mountains, he said. And also because they were so fortunate as not to have any gold or oil. And Montalvo had surveyed Europe from a high watchtower. He pointed out that most of the Swiss were German speaking, and French and Germans there had learned to live together in peace, and someday Europe must profit by that example. There would have to be a federation of states like the Swiss kitchens, with a central government having power to enforce law and order. This was a vital idea, and Lanny stowed it away among others which he would need. IV. 3 years had passed since Robert Budd had forbidden Lanny to talk with his uncle Jesse Blacklist, and during that period the painter had come perhaps half a dozen times to call upon his sister. When Lanny happened to encounter him, the boy said a polite "Oh, do you do, Uncle Jesse?" And then he took himself elsewhere. He had no reason to be particularly interested in his rather odd-looking relative, and never thought about him except when he showed up. There were so many worthwhile things in the world that Lanny did no more than wonder vaguely what might be so shocking and dangerous about his uncle's ideas. Jesse and Marcel knew each other. Marcel didn't think much of Jesse as a painter, but they had friends in common, and both were interested in what was going on in the art world. So now when the older man came, he went down to Marcel's studio and sat for a while, and Lanny went fishing or swimming. Did Robbie's prohibition against his sons talking with Uncle Jesse include also talking about him? It was a subtle point of law, which Lanny would have asked Robbie about if it had been possible. On one occasion, after Jesse had called, the stepfather remarked, "Our uncle and your father ought to meet each other now. They could get along much better." Lenny had to say something, so he asked, "Oh come?" He'd feel the same way about the war. Jesse can see any difference at all between French and Germans. "Don't think that's exactly true, Robbie," said the boy, hesitating, for he didn't like to talk about his father in this connection. He added, "V never understood my uncle's ideas, but I know how Robbie despises them." "T's a case of extremes meeting, I suppose," remarked the other. S is an out-and-out revolutionist. He blames all the trouble on big financiers trying to grab colonies and trade. He says they use the governments for their own purposes. They start wars when they want something, and stop them when they've got it. L, it looks like this one might have run away with them, commented the boy. S says not so, replied the other. He thinks the British oilmen want Mesopotamia, and they've promised Constantinople to Russia, and Syria to France. Also they want to sink the German fleet. After that their oil will be safe, and they'll make peace. Oh, you believe anything like that, Marcel? The voice that came from behind the white silk veil had a touch of grimness. Do you hate having to think that I'd have my face burned off to help Royal Dutch Shell increase the value of its shares? V. Lenny wrote to his father, "I'm finding it hard to think as you want me to." And of course Robbie understood that. He had met Americans returned from France, and seen how bitter they were against the Germans. He knew how many of the young fellows had joined the French Foreign Legion, or the Lafayette Escadrille, a group of American flyers fighting for France. One day Lenny received a long typewritten letter from his father, who was from Paris. He understood that it had been brought across by some friend or employee. "Have I with you?" wrote the father, "couldn't answer all the things that people are telling you. As it is, I have to ask you to believe that I have the answers. You know that I have sources of information, and do not say that I know something unless I do. I am making this emphatic because your happiness and indeed your whole future may be at stake, and I could never forgive myself if you were to get caught in the sticky flag paper which is now being set for the feet of Americans. If I thought there was any chance of this happening to you, I would come at once and take you away." After that solemn preamble, the head of the European Sales Department of gunmakers went on to remind his son that this was a war of profits. "I'm making them myself," he said. "Others couldn't help making them unless we gave them away. People come and stuff them into our pockets. But I don't sell them the right to do my thinking for me. Germany is trying to break her way to the east, mainly to get oil, the first necessity of modern machine industry. There is oil in Romania and the Caucasus, and more in Mesopotamia and Persia. Look up these places on the map, so as to know what I'm telling you. England, Russia, and France all have a share, while Germany has none. That's what all the shooting is about. And I am begging you to paste this up on your looking glass, or someplace where you will see it every day. It's an oil-made war, and they are all patriotic, because if they lose the war, they'll lose the oil. But the steelmen and the coalmen have worked out international cartels, so they don't have to be patriotic. They have ways of communicating across no man's land, and they do. I'm a steel man, and they talk to me, and so I get news that will never be printed. What the steelmen were doing, Robbie explained, was selling to both sides, and getting the whole world into their debt. Robbie's own income for this year of 1916 would be 5 times what it had been before the war, and the profits of the biggest American powder and chemical concern will be multiplied by 10. A gentleman whom you met with me in Monte Carlo is keeping very quiet nowadays. He doesn't want to attract attention to what he is doing, which is stuffing money into all the hiding places he can't find. I would wager that his profits before this slaughter is over will be $250 million. He has put himself in the same position as yourself. Couldn't help making money if you want to. But that wasn't all. These international industrialists had taken entire charge of the war so far as their own companies were concerned. The military men were allowed to destroy whatever else they pleased, but nothing belonging to Krupp and Tyson and Stens, the German munitions kings who had French connections and investments, or anything belonging to Schneider and Lidl, masters of the Comet desk forges, who had German connections and investments. Any hungry man who attempted to win the war by that forbidden method would be sent to some part of the fighting zone that was less dangerous for the Steel Kings and more dangerous for him. Said the father, I tell you a hundred from the plans which I know, and which I'll get into in further. The great source of steel for both us in Germany is in Lady, called the Green Basin. Get the map and look it up, and you will see that the battle line runs right through it. On one side, the Germans are getting 20 or 30 million tons of ore every year and smelting it into steel, and on the other side, the French are doing the same.
Captain Pugwalk.
On the French side, the profits are going to Frank Oyster Wendell, president of the Comet desk forges and member of the Chamber of Deputies. On the other side, they are going to his brother Charles Wendell, naturalized German subject and member of the Reichstag. Those huge blast furnaces and smelters are in plain sight, but no aviators even tried to bomb them until recently. Then one single attempt was made, and the lieutenant who had charge of it was an employee of the Comet desk forges. Surprisingly, the attempt was a failure. Robbie went on to explain that the same thing was happening to the 4 or 5 million tons of iron ore which Germany was getting from Sweden. The Danish line which brought this ore to Germany had never lost a vessel, in that service or any other, and the Swedish railroads which carried the ore were in British coal. If it hadn't been for this, wrote the father, Germany would have been out of the war a year ago. It's not too much to say that every man who died at Verdun, and everyone who has died since then, has been a sacrifice to those businessmen who own the newspapers and the politicians of Venice. That is why I tell you, if you are going to be patriotic, let it be for the American steel kings, of whom you may someday be one. Don't be patriotic for Schneider and Lidl, nor for Danny, nor for Zagoff. He died. Lenny kept that letter and studied, and thought about it his heart as he moved now. He did not fail to note the curious thing that Marcel had commented upon, the similarity of his father's views with those of the outlawed uncle. The uncle and the father agreed upon the same set of facts, and they even drew the same conclusion that nobody ought to be patriotic. The The point where they split was that Robbie said you had to stuff your pockets because you couldn't help it. Whereas Uncle Jesse Lanny wasn't sure what he wanted, but apparently it was to empty Robbie's pockets. Lanny took this matter to his mother, and it threw her into a panic.
Not even on the
Politics and high finance didn't mean much to her, but she thought about
What's
the
the
effect of
world
such news
coming
upon the
to?
husband, and made Lanny promise not to mention it to him. Just now he was putting the finishing
Okay,
touches on
who's
his
the
Easter of Mercy, and was much absorbed in it. If the French were winning the war, at least they were losing it, so Marcel could be what his wife called Asian. As it happened, it was in that Greek district that he had been sitting in a kite balloon, surveying those blast furnaces and smelters which were the source of the enemy's fighting power. He had been praying for the day when France might have enough planes to destroy them. If now the terrible idea was suggested to Magla Pattery had the power, but was kept from using it by traitors, who could guess what frenzy might seize him. So then he took a letter to his advisor in international affairs, Emraj Rambo. This old gentleman represented a small nation which was forced to buy its oil at market prices, and had never engaged in attempts to despoil its neighbors. Therefore he could contemplate problems of high finance from the point of view of the 8th and 10th Commandments. When Lanny expressed his bewilderment at the seeming agreement between his conservative father and his revolutionary uncle, the retired diplomat answered with his quiet smile that every businessman was something of a revolutionist, whether he knew it or not. Each demanded his profits, and sought the removal of any factor that menaced his trade or privileges. Lanny, who was questioning everything and wondering about his own relation to it, was thinking a great deal about whether he wanted to follow in his father's footsteps and become a munitions king of America, or whether he wanted to play about with the arts. And now he heard this old gentleman, who knew the world and that it would swallow him, point out the difference between business and honor. One might look at the Rembrandt picture, where you remain to live simply, without depriving others of their privilege. But one couldn't become an oil king without taking oil away from others. Said Lanny, my father argues that the businessman creates wealth without limit. Replied the other, the only thing that I have observed being without limit is the businessman's desire for profits. He has to have raw materials, and he has to have patents, and if he has too many competitors, his profits vanish.
They're my way.
Robbie argues that he holds a machine gun and voice stops suddenly, as if doubting his own argument. Very invention has an intellectual element, conceded the other. But the machine gun is obviously intended to limit the privileges and
No,
of other men.
carneta.
Just now it is being used by the guild
Carneta, samba, carneta.
It is in fact a sort of
Carneta.
Having thus disposed of Robert Buddha's head, the elderly ex-diplomat went on to deal with him as a pacifist.
Oh,
Remarking, with the same gentle smile,
I was
that it had been
tensed
long
up
since
there,
kings were men of
trying to
power,
get that
riding
40
ahead of their
meters.
retainers and splitting
Oh,
swords with
there
their
she is.
athletics. The invention of machinery had produced a new kind of men, who sat in offices and dictated orders which put other men at work. If they felt that their interests required more, they could. But they themselves would remain safe. Oh, you know any Latin? Asked Emraj Rambo.
that was
And
correct.
when the answer was no, he quoted the verse of the poet Ovid, beginning, that others make war. The old gentleman suggested that these words might serve one of the great munitions families on its coat of honors. Alger Ali. He was too polite to name the Bud family, but Lanny got the point, and reflected that if his father had heard this conversation, he might have put Emraj Rambo on the prohibited list along with Uncle Jesse.
Incognito.
And now and then, let her score and casual as herself. Enjoyed our meeting so much, she said just like that. You could hear Miss Noggins voice.
You hold her off.
Ladies telling her,
Then the
"Don't take it too
lay.
seriously." That's the way women are made to suffer. Let
And
them
I'll
do the
cover
suffering.
you.
So Lanny went
Oh,
to
skull face.
Don't wear your heart on your sleeve. Don't make yourself too cheap. Among the fashionable people, one was an American girl who gave evidence of being
God
cultured and
damn.
soulful. She was pretty and stout, as they all kept themselves.
Fierce.
Silks and satins and lawns and whatnot were cut to the latest pattern.
God
She passed
damn.
and glanced at her hands and played, just emerged as a man with a culture soul, blushing easily, and with strange messages flashing along his nerves. The world was at war, and nothing was certain, and young and old were learning to take their pleasures as they found them.
Okay.
But
that
Lanny had
sounds
dreams
like
of shining and wonderful things in love.
Oh,
He thought it over, and told his mother about this too well and this. And he asked, is she interested in what you are thinking?
you can see
She
those
said,
long
"That
arms
appeals to you
sticking up.
especially." When the boy admitted that she hadn't so far, Beauty said, and what will you talk about?
I would
How
take
will you
cover.
keep being bored? So he would go off and lose himself in his piano practice. He could find highly exciting things in music and poetry. His anthology contained a poem by Bobby Burns, who spoke with authority concerning sexual prodigality. It hardens it within and petrifies the feeling.
What's that?
But he resolved to wait a while, and Lady Rosemary would find that she missed him more than she had expected. She wrote about Rick, who had finished his training and left for France. He had had 2 days leave and
Nobody's
had come
there,
home,
or it
looking
has to
splendid in
be
his khaki uniform.
stealth.
He had been so happy at getting what he wanted. Not a word about sadness in going away, and Lanny understood that there hadn't been many words that was the English way.
Well, mouse is not.
Business as usual. A
Gotcha.
few days later, a card came from Rick himself. No address on it, except the number of his unit in the Royal Flying Corps. I'd set up here. Wish I could write you all about it. Jolly lot of fellows. I think you talking to. Write me the news. Household Sophocles. And when are the Americans coming in? Rick. Don't you think these jolly fellows in their camp a few miles behind the lines? It would be about the same as the one he had visited on the rolling South Point
Man,
Lane.
Carnita, you need to get out of the way.
Cheeks of bright red. Also shaven, except for now and then a Berlin mustache.
Take all that ammunition right in your forehead. I'm gonna die. Help me. Shoot him. Oh.
RFC killed in action.
Shoot.
Find me. October 17, 1916. So it went. VII.
Somebody send me
There
one of
was
those
mourning all
heel
around Lanny
robots,
Bud.
please.
Women in black everywhere on the streets. Women in terror, shouting
Ouch!
every time they heard a knock at the door. Afraid to look at a
Poor
newspaper
bats.
with its stories of wholesale slaughter. Or Sophie the Lotterette was visiting CHS to help re-educate the victims. Not really caring much about them, but feeling that she had to do something, because Eddie was doing something, everybody was doing it, you had to or you go crazy. Letters came from the ambulance driver. His parents brought them to duty, and Lanny had a chance to read them. The exciting occupation was having an unexpected effect upon a rather young American whose only previous achievements had been in billiard matches and motorboat races. He wanted Sophie to share his adventures, and wrote quite vivid prose. He was sleeping in a half-demolished barn, and the French peasants' manure pile had become a leading feature of his life, the least unpleasant of the smells of war. He was living on bully beef, and a cow chicken from Chicago made a holiday. In front of him were the French trenches, and behind him the French artillery, and he tried to count the number of shots per
Thank you,
minute,
Carne
but it couldn't be
Cow.
done because they overlapped. You were on duty for a 24-hour stretch,
What are you,
and the ambulance
Macarena
would be overwhelmed
pile?
at any time of the day or night. You drove without lights, in mud anywhere from 3 inches to 3 feet deep, and you heard all the familiar jokes about seeing a cat lying in the road and stooping to pick it up, and finding that there was a man under it, walking to town, or perhaps riding horseback. Keeping an ambulance right side up on such a road was really a lot of fun, and trying to see the shell holes at night made you wish you had a pet cat along. Sometimes the shell holes were made especially for your ambulance, and that was something you made notes about with your broncardia. You wore a helmet, just in case. Have you seen Oldville? Inquired Eddie, and it was one of Captain Bear's fattest cartoons, with which the English at the front were teaching themselves to laugh at calamity. Aldibo was a cockney with a large mustache and a serious expression. He was shown crouching in a shell hole with bombs going off all around him, and saying to his companion, angrily, "Al, if you manage to a better hole, go to it." And there was the other colonel who had come home for a brief leave and found that he couldn't get along outside the trenches. He had one dug in his garden, and was sitting out in it on a rainy night, half covered with water, and with an umbrella over his head. That was the sporting way to take war. The Americans living in France became ashamed of themselves and of their country. You just couldn't stand it all the grief and desperate agony, and go on playing cards and dancing, going to the dressmaker and the hairdresser as you had done in the old days. It grew harder and harder for Lenny, and now and then he would find himself thinking, "I'll have to ask Robbie to turn me loose." He helped himself a little by reading German books and playing German music, and remembering Kurt and the other warm-hearted people he had met at Schloss Studendorf. He hadn't heard from Kurt for quite a while, and could only wonder, did it mean that he had gone to the front and been killed, or had he too become disgusted with Americans because they didn't do anything to stop the Allied blockade which was starving the women and children of the fatherland? Lenny wrote another letter, in care of Mr. Robin, and received a reply from the oldest of the two little brothers. "Dear Mr. Lenny Budd, my papa has mailed the letter that you sent it. I am learning to write the English but not so good. I have the picture that you sent of my papa and feel that I know you and hope that I meet you when no more it is war. Yours respectful, Hansi Nolan. Yes. I am 12 and I practice now Beethoven's D major romance for violin. Ix. The end of the year 1916 was a time of bitter discouragement for the Allied cause. Moving ahead into the war
I have a feeling.
Russia was practically out of they had accomplished little. The French armies were discouraged by until many times marched into barbed wire entanglements and mowed down by machine gunners. And on top of all that came the resumption of unrestricted submarine warfare. The German High Command had made up their minds that even if America came in, the destruction of Allied commerce would be so great that Britain would be brought to her knees before America could do anything effective. At the end of January, notice was given that all shipping in British and French waters in the Mediterranean was subject to attack without warning. In January, the total destruction of shipping was 285,000 tons. In the following April, it rose to 852,000. It was plain to everybody that Britain could not stand that rate and loss, and the American people had to face the question whether they were willing to see the British Empire replaced by a German one. At least everybody from Lanny knew said it was the question, and no use fooling yourself. The youth found it a hard problem to think about, and wished more than ever to have his father at hand. He read bits of the speeches which President Wilson made, and the notes which he wrote to the German government, and it seemed to him that the only way he could comply with his father's orders was to start a new and determined campaign of Siberia and Cornell. The U-boats began seeking American ships. And then came the publication of an intercepted letter from the German government, inviting the Mexicans to enter the war on the German side, and promising them a handsome reward, including Texas, Arizona, and New Mexico. That helped Americans to understand what the war was about, and there was a general movement of the country to get ready. An exciting time for Americans in France, and for none more than Lanny. Would his father expect him to be neutral now? Or was he going to be free to feel the way everybody else did, and the way he wanted to, or at least thought he wanted to? Last night, farther away, and the voices of Mozart and Beethoven good nature. France was all around, and its questioning was insensible. Why don't you Americans help us? Lenny heard it so often that he didn't go out anymore, but became a sort of youthful hermit, swimming and fishing by himself, and reading books about other times and places. He wrote his father concerning these troubles, and added, "Tell me if America is coming in, and if so, what I am doing." Then one day late in March came a telegram of the old style ones such as Lanny had not received for more than 2 years and a half. "Hailing for Paris tomorrow, wish you to join me there, a wire from arrival Robert Hubbard. 17. A man's world. Lenny spent the whole day thinking about submarines. It was the time when the German campaign reached its high point. They were sinking 30,000 tons a day, and one of every 4 vessels which left the British house never returned. One can imagine a submarine rising from the sea unseen.
Told you about
Heard
that.
how torpedoes exploded, and people rushed into lifeboats.
I admire your persistence.
Robbie was the sort of man who would and Lenny felt as if he were tossing a coin every hour for his father's life.
That's a
That's the telegram from the Havre. Thank God, he was on land. He was writing. and next day Lanny received the most important letter of his young life. Robbie was proposing to take him to Connecticut. Think the time has come when you want to know your own country, wrote the father. T appears certain that we are going into the war, and whatever part you take ought to be in America. My wife invites you to stay with us this summer. I will get you a tutor and you will study hard, and be able to enter prep school this fall and get ready for college. It meant Yale, which was Robbie's own college, and that his forefathers were 100 years or more. There was a letter for Beauty also. Robbie hoped she would agree with him that a lad ought to have a chance to know his own people. Beauty had now had into herself for 32 months. Robbie had an arithmetical mind. He said that if the war lasted, it would be better for Lenny to be in Connecticut, where Robbie could arrange for him to render service in the production of munitions. You may put your mind at ease on one subject, and you will not go into the trenches. He is too valuable to me, and I will be valuable to the government. Villager Allie.
I'm sorry, village idiot.
Asked the mother, after they had shared these letters. Al, of course, I'd like to see America, said the youth. And the mother's heart sank. Such a lovely safe nest she had made here, but of course he wouldn't stay in it. The last thing in the world that they wanted appeared to be safety. Suppose I'll have to give up. Listen, he hurts are also against the woman. Don't worry, Beauty, I'll take good care of myself, and come back when the war's over. I don't think I'll want to live anywhere but here. You will meet some girl over there, and she'll tell you what to do. And going to get tough, replied the boy. But he didn't look it. Knew this had to come, Lenny. But I hope Robbie would wait till the sea was safe. Plenty of people are getting through. And he and I are pretty good swimmers. Lenny thought for a moment, then added, wonder what he's going to do about telling his friends the bad news about me. He told his wife about us both before they were married. I imagine he'll tell other people that you're his son, and let it go at that. Don't let it worry you. If anybody doesn't want me around, said the boy, and always go somewhere else. Shall you miss me too terribly, Beauty? Tell me all right if I know you're happy. I ought to tell you a bit of news that I've just learned I'm going to have a baby. H. Gosh. A wide smile spread over Lanny's face. That's grand, Beauty. It will tickle Marcel.
The G
Mention it or like that.
superstar, Wicked Sick. This is a fun
After a while,
crowd.
he inquired, is it another accident, or did you decide to do it?
Brontosaurus, Bumblelele.
Tease and ran place to bring up a child. Beauty, I can tell you that. He kissed her on the
Guys,
cheeks
what
and said she
happened to
cried
the
with
chicks?
happiness and sorrow maybe.
Where are the girls?
Aye. It seemed cruel that a youth should be so excited at the idea of leaving his mother. But he couldn't help it, and she understood. To be with Robbie in Paris, and travel on a great steamer, and see that city of New York which he knew from motion pictures, and the marvelous Pampa Buds, the economic foundation of his life. It was the center of his imaginings, a Fort Vulcan a million
That's a
times
stupid
magnified, a family
fence.
of the soul kid where monstrous forces were generated.
Thank you.
And to meet the mysterious family, so many of them that he couldn't keep their names straight, and all different
Hey,
years.
Mr. Shells.
Robbie didn't often talk about them, but behaved as if they were a dark secret. Or perhaps it was Lanny who was the dark secret. He packed a
Take
secret
it.
tape with him. That required only a couple of hours, and he was ready to go on the evening train. Beauty wrote down and record was such short notice. He was mother's daughter. And who else would love him as she had? The world was cruel. So many wicked people in it. Women especially understood their hearts. The cold and selfish ones. The gold diggers. The parties. So many things she lost to tell. And now it was too late. He couldn't remember them. He was crazy with eagerness to get out into that world which seemed to her so full of pain. She gave him many warnings. Extracted many when they said all the time over that she was boring him a little. Lenny had a goodbye talk with Marcel, and this was more to the point. Marcel had left his family, respectable bourgeois in a provincial town. They had wanted him to be a lawyer, perhaps a judge, and instead he had come to Princeton Day on campus. They gave him a small allowance, but didn't pretend to like his work. We are lucky, Marcel said.
Oh.
Parents are sympathetic. They'll stand by you if you don't succeed. Don't be surprised if you don't like your relatives. Don't bear your heart to the hawks. That makes you say that? Asked the boy, puzzled. Rich people are pretty much the same all over the world. They believe in money, and if you don't need money, they think there's something wrong with you. If you don't see life as they do, they take it as a criticism, and right away you're an outsider. If I were taking you to meet my family, that's how I have to warn you. Al, I'll write and let you know what I find.
Real
Marcel,
fierce.
if you like it, alright? I'm just putting you on guard.
Real
You've had a happy life so far. Everything has the piece, but it can hardly be like that all the way.
You guys better be careful.
Remarked the boy. Bobby says that America is going to help us. Tell them to hurry, replied the teacher. Our poor country is bleeding at everything. I. When he was 17, he had nearly those 32 months since he had seen his father. For many weeks it is an awkward age, but he was strongly knit, round with sunshine and red with well-nourished blood. He came running from the train to welcome Robbie, and there was something in the sight of him which made the man's heart turn over. Flesh of my flesh, but better than I am, without my scars and my painful secrets. So Robbie thought, as the lad seized him and kissed him on both cheeks. There was a trace of down on Lanny's lips, light brown and soft. His eyes were clear and his look eager. He wanted to know everything about his father in the first moment. The great rock of a man that everybody could depend on. He would solve all the problems, relieve all the anxieties out in the first moment. Robbie looked just the same as ever. He was in his early 40s, and his vigor was still unimpaired. Whatever clouds might be in his moral sky showed no trace. He looked handsome in brown tweeds, with tie and shoes to match. Lenny, whose suit was gray, decided at once that he would look better in brown. Now, what do you think about the war? The first question every man asked answered. The father looked grave immediately. You're going in, not exactly. ND, are you going to support it? What can I do? What can anybody do? It was nearly the end of March. Relations with Germany had been severed for many weeks, and President Wilson had declared a state of horticulture and humane neutrality. America was going to arm its merchant vessels, and in the meantime Germany was going on sinking them, day after day. Shipping was delayed. The vessels in American harbors were afraid to venture out. What can we do? Repeated Robbie. The only alternative is to declare an embargo and abandon our European trade entirely. What would that do? He would bring a panic in the league. But would have to shut down and throw 20,000 men out of work. Driving to the hotel in a horse-drawn cab, Robbie explained the situation. A large-scale manufacturing enterprise was geared to a certain schedule. A quantity of finished goods came off the conveyors every day and was boxed and put into freight cars or trucks, or, in the case of Bud's, which had its own river frontage, onto ships. Vessels were loaded and moved away, making room for others. If for any reason that schedule was interrupted, the plant would be blockaded because its warehouses could hold only a few days' output. The same thing would happen at Lorraine, because raw materials came on a fixed schedule that had ordered and had to be
Shit.
but there was a place to store only a limited supply. They were supposed to go through the plant and be moved on. But, said Robbie, was the situation not merely with steel mills and munitions plants, but with meat packing and flour milling, making boots and saddles, automobiles and trucks, anything you could think of. Rightly or wrongly, wisely or unwisely, American business had geared itself to the task of supplying the need of the nations of Europe. American finance had geared itself to taking and marketing their bonds. If all this were suddenly stopped, there would be such a breakdown as had never been known in the world before, and over 20 million men out of work, declared the representative of a gunmakers corporation. Lenny had heard many persons express disapproval of those who were making money out of this war.
Man.
Sophie, or Sophie, and Chabot. But when he listened to his father, all that vanished like mist before the morning sun. He saw right away that things had to be like this. If you were going to have machinery and produce goods on a big scale, you had to do it in a fixed way. The artists and dreamers and moralists were just talking about things they didn't understand. At least that was the way it seemed until Lenny got off by himself. Then he began to have troubles in his thinking. Robbie was all for Bud's, and defended the right of Bud's to get all the business it could, and to keep its workers employed. But Robbie didn't like Zaroff, and had a tendency to resent the business that workers got. Robbie blamed Schneider Kreuzer because it sold goods to neutral countries which resold them to Germany. He objected to the French liberals protecting their properties in Germany. But suppose that Bud's had owned plants in Germany, would Robbie be trying to take care of them, or pointing out the harm it would do if they were bombed? In short, wasn't there as much to be said for one set of businessmen as for another? As much for Germans as for British or French or Americans? Lenny felt in duty bound to be fair to his friend Kurt, and to Kurt's family who had been so kind to him. He could not forget having heard Herr Meissner using these very same arguments about the need of German manufacturers to get raw materials and to win foreign markets in order to keep their workers employed and their plants running on schedule.
It's the fierce.
He was extremely puzzled.
Real.
But Lenny didn't say much about it, because for 2 years and a half he had been learning to keep his ideas to himself. In wartime it appeared that nobody wanted to see both sides of any question. IV. Of course the father and son didn't spend all their time discussing world politics. Lenny had to tell about Beauty and Marcel. About the painter's woods, and his way of life, and his work. About the new baby they were going to have. On purpose she is somewhat rare event nowadays, so Robbie remarked. And about Sophie and her Eddie Patterson and his ambulance driving. About Mrs. Emily and Les Fortiers, and Ork and Pretty and how he had died. About Sep CHNS, and the war victims who were being re-educated, including Landy's Gigolo, who would never do again. And about Mr. Robin, and the letters to Kurt, and the little brothers, and the shoes, and the Robbie Market, and Bonnie Market. And about Rosemary Lawrence' son and Peter's son. And Rick was freeing as soon as Lenny learned that he was to have a few days in Tennessee got off the car to Rick, on the chance that
I
he
like
might be able to
this.
get a day's leave and visit his friend.
He's just
Robbie
like,
would ask questions, and Lenny
I'm
would
going
pick
where
up
I'm
details he
gonna
had
go.
left
I
out.
don't care.
There was Marcel's house.
I'm about to flank you.
It was getting better and better. Everybody agreed. He was doing an old peasant woman who grew roses on the cap, and had lost 3
He's
sons.
just like, I'm
one
going
after
down
another,
here.
And it showed in her face.
I don't care.
Still more
Shit.
in the portrait that Marcel was making of her. The one he had done of Beauty, poster of
I
hers,
like that.
was to be sure that it's not in the pen play, and one of the things Lenny wanted to do was to find out about it. If Robbie went to view it, he would find a new woman, one much more serious, and really sad. Of course, she's not that way all the time, added the boy.
Creeping
That's
up
how
on
Marcel
over
sees
here
things. He can't forget fate for what it's done to his foster or what it's doing to friends. Robbie also had things to tell. For the most part, they had to do with business.
You know, when somebody
He was
is
not one of those
like
persons who have states of soul which require
moving
explanation.
like that, it's like
He
you
had
know
made
where
money
he's
in the
going.
fist, and it kept him in good humor. He found it pleasant, not only for himself,
His mind
but
is
for
in
many other
another
people.
place.
He was troubled because Lanny's wants were so modest in that regard. He seemed to think they ought to celebrate their reunion by buying something handsome. The only thing Lanny could think of was one of Marcel's paintings to take to America. But Robbie didn't think that would be such a
No,
good
let's
idea
not
to
let
say
it kill
anything about
shot yet.
stepmother at the outset. Lenny
would
told
be
how seriously Beauty was taking the re-education
a
of the U.S.,
disaster.
and so Robbie sent her a check for a couple of $1,000s, telling her she might use it for the
Yeah.
purpose if she pleased.
Puts on sound.
He added a
It's
friendly
my
message to
honor.
Mrs. Emily, knowing that Beauty would take it to her. In this way, the money would win credit for Beauty with that socially powerful lady. Robbie explained this procedure, so that his son might learn how to make his way in the world. No use to have money unless you knew how to use it, and how to handle people. There were some to whom you gave it with a careless gesture, and others to whom you doled it out carefully. Robbie remarked with a smile that there had been personal reasons for his opposition to America's entering the war. Buds would now begin manufacturing for the United States government, and Robbie would get no commissions on that. T would be a great satisfaction to my brother Walker, he added. T has paid him to see me making more money than himself. Lenny was going to meet this brother, so the time had come for Robbie to tell about him. Even if he might you, but don't expect him to be anything else, because nature hasn't made him that way. He's all right if you let him alone. But unfortunately I hated him since the day I was born, and attracted too much attention in the nursery. I was better looking than he, and mother made too much hustle on me. Robbie spoke playfully, but made it plain that there was something off between his older brother and himself. When Robbie had come of age, he had offered to learn the selling end of the business, and the father had given him a chance, working on commission, plus an expense account. This latter had made much
Somebody
trouble,
was
because
behind
Lawford
me.
objected to one item or another.
I was
When
focusing
Robbie
on
lost
your
money to
art.
Captain Burgescu, his father called it paying his gambling debts at the company's expense. Envy then came this war, said Robbie. That was my good fortune, but surely not my fault.
Dang
It
it.
resulted in my having Nathan 2 or 3 times his own towards hard running the plant, while I don't have to do another lick of work in my life unless I feel like it. V.
Alright.
Just before
Well,
we
he
left
had
Riviera, a world
well,
event
or
to
he
watch
went
Russian
stealth.
revolution
Usually there's
overthrow
an
of the
X.
Tsar.
Yeah.
Everybody was speculating its
okay,
and what would be its
good.
effect upon the war. Most people in France believed it would
Nice
help the
try.
Allies.
Well, not very
The Russians would
nice.
fight harder, now that they were free. But Robbie said that Russia was out, because of graft,
I'm being
incompetence, and
facetious.
the breakdown of the railroads. He said that freight had been landed from hundreds of steamers at Archangel in the far north, and at Vladivostok on the Pacific, and there was no way to get it to the war zones. Tens of millions of dollars worth of goods was piled along the railroad tracks for miles, without more than a single tarpaulin to cover the boxes. Included in the stacks were machine guns, and of course they were rusting and would soon be useless. Meanwhile, the Russian peasant soldiers were expected to defend themselves with clubs and march to the attack with
Hey,
five men to
why
the
did
rifle.
that second one
That
go
is
off?
going to happen,
man?
said Robbie, as breakdown and chaos. The country may be pillaged, or the Germans may take it. The German troops will be moved to the west, and may well be in Paris before the Americans can raise an army or get it across the ocean. That is what the German general staff is reckoning on. The father revealed the purpose which had brought him to Europe. The War Department of the United States government had sent an emissary to the president of Buds, asking him to consider proposals for the licensing of Bud patents to various firms such as Vickers and Schneider, which were working day and night making munitions for the Allied governments. Under such licenses, they would be permitted to make Bud machine guns, Bud anti-aircraft guns, and so on, paying a royalty to be agreed upon. If America should enter the war, Bud itself would no longer be in position to manufacture for European nations, and it was designed to provide others to the benefit of Yankee engineering skill.
Did I say
This
Realto
question,
hours?
licensing
Man,
had been
what is
subject of
this?
controversy inside the Bud
I
organization
have
for
a
years.
real well much saying.
Foreign
You
governments
can't
were
say
always proposing it,
completely,
offering
but
handsome royalties.
how many?
Robbie had opposed the
How is
policy,
that?
while Lawford had favored it.
Three
Each had
kills,
labored to persuade
okay.
the father to his point of view. The old
Every
brother
one of
insisted that
those
if he
had
was
to be
extend the plan any further,
less than that.
they would have to borrow ammonia, and then someday the pacifists would impose a scheme of disarmament. Buds wouldn't be able to meet its obligations, and some Wall Street banking syndicate would gobble it up. Robbie, on the other hand, argued that European
see that.
manufacturers would make the most generous offers and sign on as many dotted lines as you prepared for them. But who was going to watch them, and know how many shell fuses they really made? Lenny got from this a clearer realization of the situation between his father and his oldest uncle. The uncle was morose and jealous, and a dispute which had begun in the nursery had been transferred to the office of the company. Lawford opposed everything that Robbie advocated, and attributed selfish motives to him. As for Robbie, he seemed convinced that the chief of the brother's life was not to let Robbie have his
Redacted
way in anything.
Rochambeau and Scary Face. Oh, oh, oh.
Licenses would be issued to several European munitions firms, and in order to solve Robbie's feelings, his father had sent him to do the negotiating. P.I. Robbie telephoned to the home of Basil
Hopefully
Zach,
Carmelos
which was
is
on the
better
Ivory
practice.
March. Melanie was in the room
Fancy,
where we had the
huh?
conversation. The munitions king said something which caused Robbie to smile, and replied, "Yes, but he's not so little now." Robbie turned his eyes on Lenny as he listened. "Very well," he said.
I'm trying to hit Scary Face and Carmelos.
The father was not going to see what anymore. The old devil asked if I had that very intelligent little boy with me. He says to bring you along. Want to go? Why? Exclaimed the intelligent little boy. But what does he want with me? Won't let your vanity be flattered. He's got something he wants, and he'd like to make it a social matter, not one of business. Watch him and see how an old Levantine trader works. Doesn't he have an office? Inquired the boy. His office is where he happens to be. People find it worthwhile to come to him. Lenny dressed for this special occasion, and late in the afternoon of a day which promised spring, they drove to 53 Avenue Punch, just off the Park Nassau. It was one of a row of stately houses, with nothing to make it conspicuous. A home for a gentleman who didn't want to attract attention to himself, but wanted to stay hidden and work out plans to appeal to other men's fears and greeds. A discreet and velvet-footed man in black opened the door, and escorted them into the reception room, which had furniture and paintings and excellent to no doubt the Duke Princess. Presently they were invited to a drawing room on the second floor, where the first thing they saw was an elaborate silver tea service ready for action. The windows were open, the soft breeze stirred the curtains, and birds sang in trees just outside. Presently the munitions king entered, looking rare and more known does not make $250 million without some cares. He had hardly finished reading them when a lady entered behind him. Had she heard the story of the boy who had had such a fine idea about helping his father's business? Or was it the special importance of the contracts which Robert Budd was bringing? Anyhow, here she came, and Zaroff said, "You said Bill Franco," with a tone of high pride. "Would you please allow what the market here?" She said, very kindly, "What do you do, messers?" And seated herself at the tea table. He had the only 17 when she had met this munitions salesman, and they had been waiting 27 years for her
Save me.
husband to die.
Thanks.
She was a rather small and inconspicuous person, gracious, but even more reserved than her companion. His blue
These
eyes were
people
watching
are
the visitors.
killers.
Her dark eyes were, for the most part, watching.
Ruthless.
She had the
Scary
and
face.
wore a
Somebody
tiara.
save me, it's scary
Her
face.
curls nearly to her waist. We have had a dangerous trip, and but, she remarked. Many
Thanks.
men are facing danger these days, madam, replied Robbie. Oh, you think that your country will help us to end this threat war? So,
Uh-oh.
I did become we shall tell that.
Scary face. He was right. Kill shot. That's something. He's already hit two people.
Time to get emotion, but when they moved, it was
Just
forced.
stay right there, scary
They
face.
talked
That's
about
cool.
the military situation.
Don't move.
Zaharoff set forth the extreme
Dang
importance
it,
to
he hit
civilization
somebody
overcoming
else.
the German menace. He
He's
told
good
about
with
what
that.
he had done to set up the Nazi in Greece and bring that country in on the side of the Allies.
Nice coming after
Say
me.
how much money he had spent, that he had moved
Help.
This is my native land, he said.
Scary face.
Love of Greece has been the first
Dog,
passion of my
yeah.
life, and hatred of Turkish cruelty and fanaticism has been the second. As he talked about these matters, his voice trembled a little, and Lanny thought, was all to play acting? If so, it was a remarkable performance.
Slowly, step by step, inexorably. Scary face is coming for me.
And spent millions buying newspapers and politicians, holding
My
wires against
nightmare.
Constantine and his German wife. Zaharoff had gone into the room and wanted Messalina of his British companies. Just as many which the Allied governments wanted done, but which were too
Hey,
discreet for
Carlos,
them to
can you
do.
go rent kill shot
PII.
scary face?
Presently, they were talking
Where
about
is
President
he?
Wilson, who had said that Americans were proud to fight.
He's
and
all the way
had
over
been
there.
elected with the slogan, he kept us out of war.
He's planning to
Robbie
take me
explained
from
that this was
behind.
Montana, to find some high moral basis for whatever it decided to do, and we would do it under divine direction. Now this president was talking about our for democracy, and Zaharoff asked if that was supposed to be a moral slogan.
Plotting, scheming to take me from behind.
And Zaharoff, but it is supposed to be Greek politics, not. L. I should want to write the definition somewhat carefully. The old man smiled one of those strange
That's
smiles,
right,
in which his
redacted.
wonderful eyes never took part. "'Tis playing with fire," said the other, unsmiling. "Ye have seen in Russia what it may lead to, and not
Oh,
even
a
Wilson
scary
wishes the war
face
to
and
end
he's
that way."
got long arms.
"God forbid," exclaimed
I know what you're
Nation's king.
planning.
And no one can doubt the sincerity of that.
You
When
just
you
go
have
on
a
and
lady of
plan.
ancient lineage to 44 it is necessary to pay some attention to her.
You
So
have
President
caught my
Robbie
attention,
remarked,
scary
"That is a lovely
face.
tea service you have, Duquesa." "'Tis an heirloom of my family," replied Mara del Pilar Antonia Angela Patrocino Sereno Miro y Baruch, Duquesa de Marquini y Villafranca de los Caballeros.
Fierce.
Had a gold one, within the host. I have given it to the government, to help save the franc. Was there just the trace of a
Scary
frown on
face
the
out
gentle
of
visage
the...
of the Spanish
Oh
king's
no, I
cousin?
locked up.
She
Okay,
had
we
been
won.
laboring for a quarter of a century to make a triumph of a love intriguer.
See what I
Perhaps
tell
it
you,
cannot be done
scary
in one
face.
lifetime. Perhaps in the midst of wars and revolutions one must excuse lapses from a much for money. After they had had their tea, the old man remarked,
Fierce,
"Now about that
scary
matter of business,
face.
Mr. Budd." The hostess rose. "I'm sure you gentlemen don't want an audience for your conference," she said, and added sweetly to Lanny, "Oh, would you like to come and see my beautiful tulips?" Of course Lanny went, and so lost his chance to observe the old trader in action. He was taken into a fine garden, and introduced to a pair of snow-white poodles, beautifully groomed and shaved to resemble lions. He learned about the tulips, which were just unfolding their beauties, the bazaars, which are yellow marked with purple and red, the diplomen, which are white marked with violet or purple. Also a new kind from Turkestan. The Dutch people had cultivated them for centuries, and once they had in the basis of the Greek financial boom. "Oh, you really love flowers?" asked the Duke. And when he told about the menu, and the court full of daffodils
Double
and
take
bougainvillea where he did his
Gunda
reading,
guy
he was used to ladies with
Say
titles,
my name?
and not bought by them.
Yeah.
He
I
suspected
know
that
you
one who had
guys.
the munitions came to our companion didn't feel entirely safe or happy, so he was moved to be kind. He
Chronic
mentioned Mrs.
or
Emily,
dumb
found that the
fight.
Duke recently
You are
left,
dumb
and had
fight.
needed more work. So Lanny told what she was doing at CHS.
I think,
and the story
you
of
know, I
the
always saw
Jig-
Urdu,
so
you
he
know,
also
that's some
found
kind of language.
She remarked that
But,
she
you
would
know,
like to send the present to that poor man. Since he
that's
paid
why I
for it,
could never
perhaps he
read
might
that,
have
but
had
I
a
just noticed there was
Time
a,
passed.
you
Two
are
business did
dumb,
not appear.
fight.
Lenny didn't want to be a nuisance to his hostess, who must have other things to do than to
Oh
entertain
yeah,
a
I'm
casual
dumb,
lady.
man.
He told her he was used to getting along by himself, and she offered to take him to the library. He had seen many large rooms with funny homes, and walls lined with volumes, e-books which were rarely touch safe to be dusted. The munitions case were all behind
The
glass.
ugly.
On the table were magazines, and he said he would be
Fierce.
happy with those.
Ugly.
So the gentle lady excused herself.
Oh, okay, I'll help.
She was far too rich to
Help me,
listen to
help me.
talk.
I'm gonna die.
And besides,
Help.
maybe this was all
Oh,
just a
yeah.
matter of business, as Robbie had said. VII. Blast the two emerged from their
God,
conference.
stupid.
Little Swan is ever much to tell anything from that.
Talk about.
The father and son strolled down the street, and
You
Lenny
are
said,
dumb.
"Al, what happened?" Robbie answered, "What
No,
was
don't.
He was going to cry, but he didn't cry.
Ouch.
Why should he cry?
Oh, he's behind me.
Supposed to be Maldives, so that his father would have the fun of doing it.
Gunda guy.
For this means I suggested that we should require our service in the liquor's plants to check their production under
I
our
don't
licenses.
care. You guys are
Going to
beating
let
us. No fair.
He said it was a very serious matter to admit strangers to a munitions factory in wartime. I answered that they wouldn't be strangers very long. He would tell them. Robbie began to laugh. He enjoyed nothing more than such a battle over property rights, especially when he had the cards close to his chest. They really need alpacas,
Coming right
he
back.
said.
I want that control point.
Indy,
I want
believe
that
me,
control
they
point.
won't get them without paying. Why should they? Lenny didn't know any reason,
God,
and said
what
so.
a moronic play,
Al,
though.
the old devil thought he knew a number of them. He was horrified at the schedule of royalties I put before him. He said he had been given to understand that America wanted to help the Allies, not to lead them to death.
Two
or
of
drive
these
them to bankruptcy.
guys.
I said I hadn't heard of any bankruptcies among the 180 biggest companies in England.
Good.
He said they had cut their prices to the bone as a economic duty for the British and French governments. I told him it was generally understood that his companies were getting the full 20% profit allowed them by British law. You can see it wasn't a conversation for a Duquesa to hear. Was she nice to you? Harry, said Lanny. Liked her. H, sure, said the father. I took it like the
Can we
concept
turn
of
this
working on a
around,
certain
or should I
point.
just...
Lenny saw that his father was not going to let Hassel's hair off under any circumstances. He said so, and Ronnie replied that a wolf didn't want to be like. What he wanted was to eat, and when it was a question of dividing up food,
Stop going to
Hamilton
100
started work in hand. He has paid out for American money, financing inventions and perfecting complicated machines. We're not going to give more secrets to Sagol, not even in return for a tea party and a small common Duquesa. We're going to have our share of the profits, paid right on the barrelhead, and I'm sent here to tell him so, and to put before him a contract which our lawyers have constructed like a wolf trap. I said it very kindly, but in plain language. Andy wanted you to sign. H, I left him the contracts, and he'll be over them tonight, and tomorrow morning I'm to see his French factotum, Pietri, and help lead and argue, and demand this change in that, and I'll tell him to take it as it's written, where the Allies can get along with a third rate of machine guns. Today, Robbie, I'll stick by me the next few days, son, and learn how we businessmen pull wires. If you turn down my contracts, I know half a dozen journalists in Paris and London who will make a story out of it for a reasonable fee. I can find a way to have the merits of the Bud products brought to the
Finally, I
attention
get
of the and
one
upright
on
member
kill
of
shot.
Parliament.
Do not hit the
For
space bar
anything
unless you
but
want to
to
win.
protect his country against the greed of nations make things send
This is a kill shot.
IX. Robbie's next conference was with Bud Smith, the ex-cowboy with the broken nose who had come down to 1, 3, or 4 years
Do not
previously
hit
and
the space
demonstrated
bar
Bud
unless you
automatic
wanna
for Captain
win.
Grogescu.
Or go
Bud had
somewhere
given up his job in
fast.
Paris to work through Robbie, and had made a couple of trips to
Do
America
not
in
hit
spite
the
of the
space bar.
submarines.
Do not
It
hit
was
the
he who
space
had brought knowledge
bar.
for Lenny to France. Now Robbie told his son that
Hit
Bud
the
had proved
space
himself
bar.
and see a confidential
Shoot him
work,
around.
and was going to have the job of keeping track of the lessees of Bud patents. Of course, Aronoff himself is a man of honor, said Robbie, with a smile. But there's always the possibility that some of the men who run his companies might be tempted to try tricks. Bud is to watch the French plans for me. One man keep track of them all? Asked the youth. Mean that he'll be the one to watch the watchers.
No,
Robbie
guy.
wanted to explain that it was impossible to carry on an industry without workers. And there were always some of these
You
rounds
are
of
done
information in
fighting.
exchange for a war.
Okay.
Bud would build an organization for knowing what was going on in munitions factories. As he did a rather dangerous job. Asked the youth. May they take him for a spy?
We won, no thanks to me.
Identify him. Andy, won't the munitions people find out about him? H, sure.
Nah, nah,
They
nah,
know we're
nah,
bound to
nah.
watch them. And won't hurt their feelings. Robbie was amused.
2 kills. I
I
thought I
you
got
don't
1
want
kill
to
too
more
much.
cash. 18. Away from all that. A telephone call for Lenny at Aquila. He answered, and let out a whoop. Here are you? Oh, glory. Come right up. He hung up the receiver. Tease Rick. He got leave. Lenny rushed out to the lift, to wait for his friend. Grabbed him and hugged him, then held him off at arm's length and examined him. Rick, you look grand. The young
Jay.
flying officer had grown to man's stature. His khaki uniform was cut down in front, making a sort of breastplate of cloth. On the left breast was a white badge, indicating the Private Foreign Certificate, and high up on both sleeves were eagle wings. His skin was bronzed and his cheeks rosy. Flying hadn't hurt him. With his wavy black hair cut close to a round service cap on top, he was a handsome fellow. And so happy over this visit, we were going to see Paris together, and Paris was the world.
The fierce
how did you manage
snack
it?
attack.
I'd done some extra duty, so I had it coming. From long hunting dog.
Blaster.
But tomorrow night,
Blaster.
Andy was in. Rick. H. Not so bad.
Come back, Johnny.
We've been fighting. We've got 2 watches that I'm sure
Johnny be
who
good.
hated the hurt. Had one single
Smell
turn
like
over in
a
mud.
shoe.
But fortunately, it was something. Lenny led him to the room, and Robbie was glad to see him. Of
What's that
course.
about?
He set up the drinks, and we took an if the alternate in
Why
their
you
force.
shooting at me?
Too much,
Stop
He
shooting.
said it was the only way
Thank
they could
you.
keep going.
This is where I really got
Let's see.
cringed last time.
He sat, devouring the gallant figure of his
Exactly the same thing.
so proud of his friend,
Oh.
thinking that he, Lenny, would never do
Full
anything as exciting
Dodger.
and wonderful as that. His father wouldn't let him. His father wanted him to stay at home and make munitions for other men to use. But at least he could hear about it, and lie vicariously. He asked a stream of questions, and Rick answered casually, not much about himself, but about the squadron and what they were doing. Of course, Rick knew what was his younger friend Ty, the
Ouch.
the hero worship. And of course it pleased him,
What it?
but he wouldn't give a sign of it. He'd take it just as he took the job. Nothing special, all in a day's work.
Huh?
Until now, what the censor wouldn't let him put on paper.
Snack
Station
attack.
General
The
Hopkins
fierce
Army,
of
who claimed
snack
to have
attack.
He belonged to what was
Who
called the
can
First Link,
save
a
us
group of
now?
pioneers who served a particular body of
We're
troops.
damned.
Observation planes equipped with 2-way radios,
Snack attack.
photographic apparatus, went out to observe enemy positions, and fighting planes went along to protect them. Their machine known as the Hunter Spreader. It was a single seater, such planes being lighter and faster, and the competition of the German Fokkers had
I
forced
just
it.
had a snack.
Both sides
And
now
I had
had what were
enough
called
time.
interrupter gears, that is, the action of the machine gun was synchronized with the propeller, so that the stream of bolts and rolling blades without movement. So you didn't have to aim your gun, but just
Ouch.
your plane. Your job was to get on the other fellow's tail and see him straight through your sights, and then cut loose. You would see two fighting planes maneuvering for position, guarding this way and that, diving, rolling over, executing every sort of twist and turn. The sight was seen over Paris pretty nearly every day, and Lenny hadn't missed it. His friend told many things about this strange new job of fighting in the air. In the sector where he flew, it was hard to distinguish the trenches, for the entire ground was a chaos of shell craters. He flew at a speed of 90 miles an hour, and got to 1,250 feet.
It's Johnny.
When he came down suddenly from that height, with a headache, earache, even to the end, but it all passed away in 3 or 4 hours. He was curious
First
as to
girl
if
this
he could
morning.
before it reached you, and if you got quickly you might dodge it. Somehow that gave Lenny the biggest thrill of anything he had heard about the war. A mile and a half
You can
under,
move, Johnny.
a quarter of a mile above the
Johnny.
earth, and planes headed over us.
Ouch.
Aye. England and France were getting ready for the big spring rush. Everybody knew where he was to be, but it was a matter of withholding
Bengal
main places.
County?
East Silent, read the signs all over Paris. Town leaders are listening.
Oh no.
With said
We're
information
losing.
all the time. The two sides were still a necessity for mastery. Began with the 1816. Now it was a local matter, varying from place to place and from week to week.
Do you mind? Would you please
Their
die?
mentor like English. The problem of the English was to train flyers quickly enough. They would get the fast reading inside the Except after he had said that. For it wasn't good form to reveal anything discouraging. But now and then he would mention a name. Umbri Valiantio, remember that fellow with the strong blonde hair you raced with, swimming? He was down last week. He don't know what happened, he just didn't come fast. Lenny got the picture of those bright-cheeked English schoolboys, 18 or 19, some younger, having told a fib about their ages. They would volunteer, and have a few tests of eyesight and sense of balance, and then be rushed to a training camp, listen to a few lectures, go up a few times with an instructor to be taught the rudiments, then go up alone and practice the synthetic, maybe a week, maybe less, 30 hours of flying, to aim as few as 20 and then all class. In placements, they were called. Half a dozen would arrive in a truck at night and be introduced to their fellows. You hardly had time to remember their names.
Snack attack again?
It's important to see themselves scheduled for the work. They would have a drink and a handshake, or maybe a salute.
I don't even
They
want
would
to
say,
go out.
"Very good,
These guys are
sir," and step
mean.
into their seats. The propellers would begin to lower, and away they would go, one after another. 88 would go out, and only 6 would come back. You would wait and listen, trying not to show your concern. After a certain period, there was no use thinking about them anymore. There was so much petrol, and no way to get any more. If the chap was down in enemy territory, you wouldn't know whether he was alive or dead. Unless he had put up an extra good fight, in which case an enemy guard might bring a bundle containing his boots and cap and pocketbook, and drop them onto the camp. Won't you ever get afraid, Rick? Asked Lenny. That was after Robbie had gone out to keep his engagements, and the two were alone. Rick hesitated. Yes, I do. But it's no good thinking about. You've a job to do, and that's that. Lenny recalled Mrs. Emily Chattersworth's mother, that very old lady who had told about the American Civil War. One of her stories had to do with a young Confederate officer whose knees were shaking before a battle, and someone accused him of being scared. Of course I'm scared, he said. And you were half as scared as I am, you have run away long ago. Rick said that was about it. He said that now and then there was some youngster whose nerves came near to breaking, and you had to figure out how to buck him up and get him started. The hardest job was that of the ground officer who had to send chaps out, knowing they weren't fit. But there was no choice. They had to keep up with the Germans. Apparently things were getting better with them, because the score was about even. You'd soon know if they had the edge. Aye. The pair went for a walk on the boulevards. Paris in wartime. Every sort of uniform you can imagine, and Rick pointing them out to his friend, English Tommies out
At
for
least
alarm.
snack attack.
Australians and New Zealanders, 12 fellows with blue hats. Highlanders and Kills Germans, 12 and 80s from young Italians in green. French Zouaves with baggy pants. African colonials, who fought fiercely, but looked bewildered in a great city. The Blondes had a new uniform of grey blue. The dressed Cape Rouge in the baggy red pants had offered too good a target. The two had lunched together. More bread, and very small portions of sugar, but anything else you could pay for. It was a special occasion, and Lenny wanted to spend all he had. He liked to be seen with his handsome young officer. His pacifist impulses weakened when put to such a test. He talked about Kurt, wishing he might be with them, instead of being on the other side of no man's land or half sun in the air, fighting. Well, he's in the army, but I've no idea where, said Lenny. He wouldn't get along so well, said the Englishman. Always had the idea that German culture was a lot of women plot. Rick went on like that at some length, saying that the reputation of Goethe was due to the fact of the Germans wanting so badly to have a world poet.
Gotcha.
Goethe wasn't really so much. Lenny listened, thinking his own thoughts. If Kurt were here, would he say that Shakespeare was a barbarian, or something like that? It was going to take a long time to wipe the bitterness of his war out of the hearts of men. If America came in, what would happen to Lenny's own heart? There is a saying, peak of angels and they flap their wings. The two friends came back from their stroll, and there was a letter for Lenny with a Swiss stamp on it, forwarded from Juan. Kurt. He exclaimed, and opened it quickly. His eyes ran over it. He's been wounded. Then he read aloud. Dear Lenny, it has been a long time since I have written. I have been very busy, and circumstances do not permit me to unbosom myself. Please believe that our friendship is not going to be ended, even by the news which I now read from abroad. I am now in hospital. It is not serious, and I hope soon to be well again. It may not be possible for me to write for some time, so this is just to say hello, and hope that you will not let anything interrupt your musical studies and the reading of the world's great poets. Ever your friend, Kurt. The envelope showed that it had been opened by the censor. It was
Where
all
is
to determine
everybody?
whether
Oh.
any particular sentence might cause a letter to be destroyed. You had to read between the lines. Figures from the drawn up list meant America's coming into the war would seem certain.
Well,
President
that's the
Wilson having
action
summoned a
there.
special session of Congress to meet in a few days. Kurt was telling Lanny that he hoped he would take part in fighting Germany. He must let ourselves speak, Rick, said the American. The other answered, fighting men don't hate one another and very often. What we hate is the damnable culture which has produced all these atrocities. Also the rulers who impose it upon incredulous people.
There's
Accept that. But with Kurt accepted
99.
that was going to be a
Jesus.
problem. IV. Robbie was in the midst of conferences with the representatives of a half a dozen armaments concerns. But he found it out to go with the tragedy exposition at the petty play. It was a matter of a more proper with the French that nothing in a world war should stop the development of genius in their country. Art lovers would come to see what was new in taste and culture even though bombs might be raining upon them from the sky. The younger painters of France were most of them putting camouflage on guns and ships. They had found terrible stages or scenes. The older ones took on which they worked, like Archimedes making scientific discoveries during the siege of Syracuse. Slam pictures, of course.
Wow,
Those were
that's
found
a
in every
good
salon.
smack.
Painters loved to portray flying flakes, horses trampling men, sabers flashing, carvings spinning
Think.
clean. Now there was a new kind of war, hard to know how to deal with. So much of it was fought at long distances, and with great declines on how we could
99
do that. How were you to
Well,
protect
Blaze
that
is
from a
almost
machine
there.
gun from looking like a photograph in illustration? A general on horseback was in savage figure of Mongolia. But what could you do with a man in a tank or a submarine? The answer before Socrates had been to go off in solitude and paint the figure of a woman in sorrow. Whether men were mutilated by sailors or by shrapnel made little difference to the wives and sweethearts of France. So said this young painter, and the fact that the others agreed with him. Mr. Mercy had been in an excellent position, and there were always people standing in front of it, and the faces showed that Marcel had conveyed something to their souls. Lenny listened to their comments, and little thrills crept up and down his spine. Even Robbie was moved. Yes, the fellow had talent. You didn't have to be an eyebrow to be sure of it. Too bad that beauty couldn't be on hand to share the sensation. She would have taken her friends, and stood and listened to what the crowds were saying. Presently somebody would have glanced at her, and then at the picture, and then back at her again, in excitement a little on, and the blood would have started climbing to Beauty's cheeks, and even to her forehead. It would have been one of life's great moments. Call it vanity, but she was like that. Professional beauties were amateur actresses, performing upon a larger stage with the help of newspapers and illustrated magazines. I'll send her a ticket and tell her to come, said Robbie, who found her foibles diverting. A further idea occurred to him, and he said to his son, "Oh, you remember what Beauty once told me about a painting that made my father angry?" Yes, that was one of the things Lanny wasn't going to forge it not in this incarnation. He said so, and Robbie inquired, "Will you be interested to see it?" The youth was staggered. Somehow the idea seemed rather horrible,
Sort of just want
And
to
read
empty
along
that
too.
magazine.
but he told himself that this was an old-fashioned attitude, unworthy of a connoisseur of art. Surely Rick would feel that way about it. So Lanny replied, "Good, of course." He even told where it was. If it's been sold, maybe you can find
That's
out where it's gone.
surprising.
Robbie gave the name of one of the fashionable dealers on the Rue de la Pikes, and told him to ask for Stadium with the Blue Veil, by Oscar de Rule. You don't have to say that you know anything about it, added the father. The two fellows set out. Lenny had to make some explanation, for of course Rick would recognize the portrait. Lenny couldn't say that he was an illegitimate son, and that this painting was to blame for it now. That would be too much for even the coldest-blooded connoisseur. He said, "My mother posed for several painters when she was young, and I guess my father thinks I'm old enough to know about it now." Al, you surely
the
can't
story
blame
is
painters,
World's
which makes the soul
End.
unifying. V. The decorous and black-clad picture dealer found nothing out of the way in the fact that two young gentlemen wanted to see the 80 with a Blue Veil by Oscar de Rule. It was his business to show pictures. A clerk went down some stairs and brought it up, and set it on a stand for them to look at, and then went to attend to another customer. So they had it to themselves, and no need to repress their feelings. My God! Exclaimed Rick. And Lanny's heart gave him several blows underneath his throat. There was Mabel Blackfuss, as she was in those days, just ripened into womanhood, a creature of such loveliness as made men catch their breath. The painter who had done her was a lover of the flesh, and had set himself to exploiting its lusciousness. The creams and whites and pinks, the velvety texture, the soft curves, the delicately changing shadows. Beauty was seated upon a silk-covered couch, half supported by one arm. There was a light blue veil across her hips, and the shower of her hair fell over one shoulder, half hiding the breast. She was in bright sunlight, and the fine strands gleamed like not such an easy thing for a painter to get. These were the modern days the always arranged when a woman went swimming at water. She put on a fairly light bathing suit, and when it was wet it clung tightly, so really there wasn't so much in the picture that Lanny didn't know already. One thing he had never seen was her breasts, with nipples that delicate pink. He couldn't help thinking, "Oh, that is where I was nourished." He thought, "Odd, what a strange thing life is." But once more the most bewildering of ideas was her accident. If it hadn't happened, where would I have been? It was the day he had the painting. It was 1899, and he knew it was just before Robbie had come along and started him on a strange journey to the present. Now, by the magic of art, the son could stand and look at the past. But the magic would enable him to look into the future, and know what he was going to do with his own power to create life. There were baby souls waiting in the unknown, for him to decide whether or not they were to be. His friend saw
I'm
how
gonna
deep and
switch
sturdy he was.
to my other
The
account.
blood had a way of mounting into Lanny's cheeks, just as you saw recorded in the portrait of his mother. Rick tried to ease him down by discussing the work from the
I
technical
thought
point
my
of view.
combat point.
Finally, he allowed himself to remark, "If I owned that painting, I don't think I'd ever marry." I expect too much. Lanny's reply was, think I'm the one who ought to own it. He recalled his father's wish to buy him something. And now he knew what it was going to be. When the dealer rejoined him, he inquired, "That is the price of this painting." The man looked at him, and then pretended to look on the back of the painting.
Okay, this
The
is
artist was
Kudo
not
Hojo
on the
Sr.
line, and the
coming
price
back
was
in.
3,200 francs, or $640. We'll take it, Lenny said. We'll pay you 200 francs down, and if you send the painting to the Hotel Krillin this evening, I will have the rest. The dealer knew then that he should have asked a higher price, but it was too late. When Lanny told his father what he had done, the latter was much amused. "Oh, you want to take it to America?" Lenny laughed in turn. "Thought Beauty and I ought to have it. I'll send it to her, and she can stick it away with Marcel's work." "Tease of course sort of a present," said Robbie, "but if it's what you want, okay. There are half a dozen paintings of Beauty somewhere in the world, and you might hunt them up." Then the shrewd businessman added, "You'll be options for 2 years, and you'll get some bargains that'll surprise you. The franc has been paid, but it won't hold after the war." He died. The tongues of the two young men were loosened and they talked about love. Lenny told of his happiness with Rosemary, now almost a year past. He didn't have a right to say how far they had gone, but he found that Rosemary had told Rick's sister, and she in turn had
I
told
think I
Rick.
was 12 or 13
These
years
young
old.
people had few secrets. Their emancipation took the form of voluminous talk, and it was a mark of enlightenment to employ the plainest words. When Lanny said he hadn't been able to be interested in any other girl, Rick told him it was hard luck that he had aimed too high. I mean, he added, justly, from the English point of view. Her family puts on a lot of side. Of course, it's all Valley-Rod. Perhaps we'll sack a lot of them before this war is over. Lenny told what his father had said to Zagreb, that it might end as it had in Russia. To which Rick replied in this free and easy way that he'd take his chances with a new deal. He informed his friend that the Cobbler family was planning for Rosemary to marry the oldest grandson of the very old Earl of St. Evan. The grandson was the future heir, since his father had been killed in the same siege of Gallipoli where Rosemary's father had been wounded. Lenny could see how useless it was for him to appeal, that is, of course, from the English point of view. He gathered the impression that he had been greatly honored by having had the future mother of an Earl for a temporary sweetheart. It was Rick's turn to open his heart. "We've been meaning to tell you, Lenny, I'm married." Cried the other, amazed. "He night before I left for France." "It's quite a long story. If you want to hear it. Do I, Rick?" The baronet's son had come to London to enlist in the Royal Flying Corps, and at the home of one of his school friends had met a girl just his age, a student at a college not far from his training camp. They had hit it off together, and used to meet whenever Rick had free time. "He talked about love," he said, "and I told her I'd never had a girl. Of course all the chaps want to have one before they go to the front, and all the girls want to have them, it seems. She said she'd try everything, and we were both quite happy, only of course there wasn't very much time." Rick paused. "Andy then?" said Lenny. I knew I was going across in a week or so. And I know her name is Nina Putney. She wanted to have a baby. I mightn't come back. Lots of the fellows have been down on their first flight." "No," said Lenny. Said, "What will you do, alone?" And she said, "No, what I want. I can take care of it somehow. She has a sister who's an interior decorator, and would take her in. You know, people don't pay so much attention to illegitimacy in wartime. They make excuses." And Nina broke down, said she had to have something to remember me by. I couldn't very well say no. "Is she going to have it?" "Oh, she writes me." "Who married her before that?" "Thought I ought to tell the painter. If he was going to have a grandchild, he'd want to be sure about it. He looked up the family and found out they were all white. I mean, what he calls all white, so then he said we ought to get married. So we got a special license and went over to the church, the night before I reported for duty." Rick, what a story. "Do you think she's a girl you'll be happy with?" "Supposedly as good a chance as most couples.
Shouldn't
Nina's
have
game,
done this.
and says she'll never hold me to
I
it.
should have gone on the other one.
She swears she wasn't trying to rope me in, and if I ever say it, she'll drop me flat." The young flying officer smiled a rather wry smile. "We're supposed to be something of a catch, aren't you, Ricky? From the English point of view?" Rick could talk about the social position of the Cobbler family, but not of the Pomeroy Nielsen's. He Peter says we'll lose the Reaches if they keep piling more taxes on them. And what price of baronet if you have to live in lodgings?
It's like you
Yeah.
clear one out and
Lenny
then
was
you do the
excited,
other,
of
and that
course.
makes you have to
He
go
wanted to know
back
about
into
Nina,
that
and
one.
what she looked like. Rick had a little picture, which showed a slender, bird-like person with an eager, intense
You did
expression.
do it in the right order.
Lenny admired her, and Rick was pleased.
Said
Lenny
some-
asked what she was studying, and about her family. Her father was a barrister, but not a successful one. She would be one of these new women who had careers of their
I
own,
need to
kept
go
their own
in
names, and so on. None of this clinging solid. Lenny said that his father was taking him to London soon. Could he meet her?
Death
Rick
match
said,
tickets.
"Of
All
course.
right.
Will I give her a present, do you suppose?
Who's it gonna be?
Does she like some picture that we could pick up for her?
I hope there's
Better one,
girls.
Not the other, and see what happens to me. If I'm put out, you'd better give her a baby basket. I'll give her both." Lenny had recently become aware of the fact that his father had a pile of money. Or Caliph of Baghdad business. Countered his friend. "Pick out a book that may keep her from being lonely, and write something in it, so she can remember you when you marry an oil princess in Connecticut. Here isn't any oil in Connecticut, Rick. Nutmeg's dead. Your father says it's called the Nutmeg State. You'll make a whole crop of new princesses out of this war. They'll be born, and they'll be crazy about you because you speak French, and dance, and have children.
Snack
like
attack.
this or
Oh,
Russian Duke in
no.
exile." Lenny was amused by his picture of himself in New England.
Damn.
He wanted to say, "He'll find out that I'm a bastard," but his lips were sealed. Half a
Oh,
day,
yeah.
another
Oh,
week,
that's
another
right.
day.
Just the
Never
guy I
think
need on
Robbie's
my
with such
team.
speed.
Some
They
squirrely
went to
little
the common
chipmunk
friendlies
guy.
and sat in the box. They had a meal at midnight, and Robbie ordered an extra
Oh, no.
bottle of wine. They strolled on the boulevards in the morning.
Drunken. Don't do it. Put down that gun.
Lenny bought a stock of chocolates, the one thing Rick and the chaps in the Air Force would appreciate. They picked up an old-fashioned open carriage with a pony but lively horse, and were driven about the Bonamini boulevards, looking at
Bella.
stores, buildings, and remembering what they could have events.
Who is she?
A little about everything.
I wonder if she's
Always
hot.
with assurance, his worldly manner which impressed his younger friend so greatly. Robbie came back to the hotel, feeling good, because Neron's Rick Tolan had given way, and the other companies were giving way, and Robbie was collecting signatures on dotted lines.
Where is she?
Lenny
Where
had
is
to
she?
ask him not to be too exultant until Rick was gone. We know how it is. He's giving his life. Maybe.
We need more
money.
girls.
LL White, said the salesman, with one of his chuckles. LL be good. But you tell Rick that if his old man wants to sell the Regis, you'll buy it. No use asking Robbie to shed any tears over the English aristocracy. Day after day, and now the American businessman worked to
There
have
she
theirs.
is.
Gateway.
Check out my gun.
He said when the time for the party came. He had a big package delivered to his room, and told him not to open it until he got back to camp. He told Landy to
Scared
save
of her.
cigarettes.
She may be
Apparently,
tough.
son would be the darling of the courtroom for a time.
Okay, shields
Robbie shook
down.
hands with him and said,
Shields
"Here
down.
we go."
Boom.
In
Gotcha.
English fashion. Lenny
Oh.
went to the train and had tears in his eyes. He just
Mean, you make a
it would
mean
have been
face
very
at
bad for
me.
Rick to have that. He said,
I'm really a
"Thanks,
sweet
old chap.
guy.
You've been with him all the
I don't
time."
know what you're missing.
And then, indicate yourself. You know, like a substitute. Write me a postcard every now and then. Really, Lenny. You know how it is. If I don't hear from you,
If you're nice, I'll let you kill me.
said Rick. Whatever comes, that's what
Without
comes.
even shooting at
It was the nearest a modern man could approach living a philosophy. L, look up for the authors of them first. I don't. The whistle blew, and Rick bolted, just in time for the train and for the honor of the Royal Flying Corps. Lenny stood, with tears flowing freely. Goodbye, Rick. Goodbye. His voice died into a sort of sob as the train moved on, and the face of Eric Vivian Pablo Gibson disappeared, perhaps forever. That was the dreadful thing about wartime. You couldn't part from anybody without the thought, LL probably not see him again.
Bella.
VII. The youth kept talking about this depressing idea until it worried his father. No, kid, he remarked, just can't be too soft in this world. It's painful to think of people getting killed, and I don't know the answer, except that maybe we put too much value on human life. We try to make more out of it than nature allows. This is certain, if you're too sensitive and suffer too much, you let your own happiness, and maybe need help, and then what are you worth to yourself or anybody else? That was something to think about. And
It's
against
the
everyone's
dreaded
thought,
snack
what
attack.
was the use of practicing the arts, of understanding and loving them, if you didn't
Dear
let
son.
yourself feel?
Vintage stuff.
The purpose of art was to awaken animals. But Robbie said you had to put them to sleep, or at any rate retire into a cave with them. Build yourself like a tortoise, with a hard shell around you, so that the world couldn't get hold of you to make you suffer. Lenny voiced it, and the reply was, "Abe, it's a bad time for art right now." As I read history, I see these
I shouldn't
periods
be
come pretty frequently
playing
and last a
that.
long time, so you have to arm yourself somehow. Unless, of course, you want to be a martyr and die in the cross, or something like that.
Bella.
It makes a melodrama, or maybe great tragedy, but it's just fun while it's happening.
Oh no, it's a fence.
They were in their room, packing to leave for England. And Robbie said,
Yes.
"Be down and let me tell you something I heard today."
I wonder if she
He
likes
lowered
me.
his voice, as if he thought that someone might be
Want to see my gun?
Enemy ears are listening.
Gotcha.
Our friend is going off to fight the German
Oh,
Fokkers, and you're
she
unhappy
does
because they
like
hate
me.
him. He's told you the Fokkers are fast and light, and it helps them, and they do him. Do you know why they are so fast and light? He
She's
says that
paying
they
attention
only
to me.
fly.
Here she comes. Yeah, she's got a big it.
What's the date? He's made out of bauxite, I know. And he has
She's
Germany
got
up
it.
here. No, Robbie. You people know things like that.
Hey, sweetie.
They don't teach them in the schools. Germany has very little, and she wants it badly.
buy a cup
It's
of coffee.
the crisis for it. Do you
Oh,
know
you're
this?
gonna kill me. I'm scared.
I know that France has a lot.
Ooh, I'm
because
in a
Eddie
trap
Harrison drove me
here.
to the place where it's being mined.
Oh.
Let me remember this trip to a town called Three Hills, back from the coast.
Go ahead.
The
Just
wreckage
empty
road
that
was blasting
magazine
the tunnels
out.
in a mountain and going down to the valley and great
I don't know
steel
what
buckets
you're
rolled
shooting
by the
at.
team that's where it came.
At least it's not me. Well, maybe you're getting some
first actual
satisfaction
site
by
of big
shooting
industrial
my
scene
direction.
included the perfume factories in grass, where peasant women have buried in millions of rose leaves, and make a finger so positive that they set you out the
I don't
valley.
know who Bella
Well,
is. This is the first time I saw her.
We'll make bauxite into a room takes electric power. Those lines of freight cars that you saw will take you to Switzerland, which has cheap power from its mountain streams. There the aluminum is made. And then it goes, can you guess? Oh, Germany? He goes to whatever country bids the highest price for it. And Germany is in the market. So if your friend is brought down by a faster airplane, you'll know the reason. Also, you'll know why your father keeps urging you not to tear your heart out over this war. Robbie. The son's voice rose with excitement.
She's like the
Anything
ant.
ought to be done about it
Quiet.
like that. Who's going to do it? It's treason. T's business. Who are the people that are doing it? Big concern, with a lot of stockholders. Its shares are on the market, anybody can buy them who has the money. If you look up the board of directors, you'll find familiar names it is, if you follow such things. You find Lord Ruby, and you say, Ekoroff. You see the Dr. Pumpkin, and you say, Knider, or perhaps E. Wendell. You see Isaac Steinberg, or some such name, and you say, Rothschild. They have their directors in hundreds of different companies, all tying together in a big net of oil, coal, chemicals, shipping, and,
Oh,
above
man.
all, banks. When you see
Oh,
those
girl.
names, you might as well bet your brains out against a stone wall as trying to
Why
stop
not?
them,
Why
or
not
even to
happen?
expose them because they own the newspapers.
It's my fault.
Robbie, protested the youth. Doesn't it make any difference to those men whether the Germans take France? They build a big industry, and they'll own it and grow it. Whatever government comes, he will have to have money, and he'll make terms with them, and business will go on as it's always done. It's a steamroller. And what I'm telling my son is, be on it and not under it. Ajax. The English and the French had made for themselves a sort of chicken road across the English Channel. The wide lane, since the heavy steel metal could go 2 lines of buoys, protected by mines. Back and forth through that lane might go troop ships, the hospital ships, the freighters, the packet boats with passengers. Up and down the lines patrolled torpedo boats and destroyers, minesweepers and trawlers. Lookouts swept the sea with glasses, the gunners stood by their high fires, ready at once notice to swing them into action. Overhead were airplanes humming, and silver bloom slowly gliding. The submarine campaign was at its peak, and
Why
the
am I
Allies were
turning
going back to
back
the
on?
ancient system of convoys or merchant ships. They were doing it with fleets of slow-moving vessels laden with coal for France, escorted by iron trawlers. At night the destroyers raced up and down, their searchlights flashing, making the scene bright almost as day. But the packet boats showed no lights, and passengers were not allowed on deck. You went on board after dark, and were escorted to your stateroom, and advised to sleep with your clothes on, and be sure to practice adjusting the light preserver which was overhead in your room. Your porthole was sealed tightly with a dark cover, and opening it would show a light was in place. You heard the sound of departure, and felt the vibration of the sea or the tossing of the vessel. You slept, if your nerves were sound, and when you woke up you were in England, if your luck was reasonably good. London in wartime was full of bustle, serious but not afraid. Ever say die, was the motto. England would follow her usual rule of losing every battle but the last. The theaters and the cinemas were crowded. Everybody was at work, both men and women. Hours were long and wages high. People of the slums had enough to eat for the first time in their lives. Lenny wondered, was that the solution to the problem of poverty and unemployment to put everybody at work trying to blow some other people up? Robbie had important men waiting to see him. There was no way for Lenny to help him. No more codes or ciphers, no rules, never came over to set as in plain words, and signed by your full name. Better not use any words censored in the middle, and not too many figures. Robbie told the story about a man who tried to claim that he had purchased 12,462,873 sables. The military intelligence department got busy to find out how he had managed to get more sables than there were in the world. Lenny had 2 young ladies to call on. Rosemary first, of course. She had got her heart's desire, and was working as a nurse. They called her a tutor, but there wasn't much difference in these days. You went right to work, learn it by doing. She was in a big hospital which until recently had been a school. Her hours were long, and leave was hard to get. But when you were the granddaughter of an earl, you can manage things in England, even in wartime. Toward sundown he went to meet her, expecting to see her in the nurse's costume delight. But she had changed to a blue chiffon dress and a little straw hat with blue cornflowers in it. The sight of her started something to tingle inside him. How lovely life to be, even with the devil in the world. They walked in a nearby park, and she tried her best to be cool and matter of fact. But there was something between her and this young American that wasn't easy to control. They sat on the bench, and Lenny looked at her, and saw that she was afraid to meet his eyes, and that her lips were trembling. "Ah, you miss me a little, Rosemary. More than a little. Haven't been able to think about anybody else. Let's not talk about it, Lenny." So he chatted for a while, telling her about Rick's brief holiday in Paris. He talked about his coming trip to America, and the reasons for it. My father says we're surely coming into the war. Congress was then in session, and it appears the debate was going on. There might be a vote at any hour. Better late than never, replied Rosemary. The English in those days had become extremely impatient with a letter writing of President Wilson. "You must blame me for it," said he. "But if you do come, things will change too." He waited a reasonable time, then asked, with a smile, "As we do, Rosemary, will they make any difference in the way your parents feel about us colonials?" "Well, that's so complicated, Lenny. Let's talk about nice, agreeable things. The nicest agreeable thing I know is sitting on a farm bench with the twilight falling around her and the evening starlight in front of her eyes, and I haven't the least desire to talk about anything else. Tell me, darling, has there been any other man in your heart in the past 11 months? Here are hundreds of them, Lenny. I'm trying to help our poor boys back to live here, ease them out of it not too horribly." "No, dear," he said. He lived in the house with a war casualty for more than 2 years. But one can work all the time, surely. One has to have a little fun. Lenny didn't know England very well. He knew that the old orders lay around in the parks in broad daylight. But just how dark did it have to be for a member of the nobility to permit a young man to take her hand, or put his arm around her on a park bench? He tried gently, and she did not repel him. Presently they were sitting close together, and the old mysterious spell renewed itself. Perhaps an hour passed. Then he said, "And we go somewhere, Rosemary?" Robbie had said, "In her to one of the cheaper hotels." They don't ask questions. Robbie was practical on the subject of sex, as upon all others. He said there were 3 things a young fellow had to look out for. He mustn't get any girl into trouble. He mustn't get mixed up with any married woman unless he was sure the husband didn't care. And he mustn't get any disease. When Lanny had reassured him on these points, he said, "If you don't show up tonight, I won't worry." X. So Lanny and Rosemary went strolling. And when they came to a place where they weren't apt to meet any of their fashionable friends, they went in, and he registered as Mr. and Mrs. Brown, and paid in advance, and no questions were asked. When they lay in the embrace which was so full of rapture for them both, they forgot the sordid surroundings, they forgot everything except that their time was short. Lanny was going out to face the submarines on the open ocean, and Rosemary was going to France, where the screaming shells paid no heed to a red cross on a woman's arm. After ye rosebuds while he made, old time is still afloat. Thus the English poet. The German has said, FLCKET ACERBIH. So there was one thing about which the two nations could agree. In countless cheap hotels in Berlin, as in London, the advice was being followed. And the wartime custom was no different in birth if you could accept the testimony of Napoleon Bonaparte, who had stood on the field of Eylau, observing the hues of the slaughter and remarking, the night in Paris will remedy all men. Their happiness was long enduring, nothing in the outside world was permitted to disturb it. Not even loud banging noises, all over the city and very close by. Lenny made a joke of it, hope that's not small Space Force after us. The girl explained that those were anti-aircraft warnings, made by a ruse, a kind of harmless bomb made of heavy paper wrapped with twine. They lay still in the dark and listened. Presently came louder explosions, and some of them
Oh, sorry.
anti-aircraft guns, said Roser. She knew all the sounds. There came the heavy crashes, and she told him those were the bombs.
Scary.
Don't
Jump. Scary.
Who surely can worry if it is, said Lanny. It was his first time under fire, and he wanted to take it in the English manner. Without as much risk as a
Jump
thunderstorm,
means
said
heroin.
Rosemary.
Jive is
So
heroin.
fools think they can frighten us by wrecking a house here and there and killing a dozen hundreds of people in their beds. Suppose those are planes? Ask you. Long occupied building. The Zeks have stopped coming entirely. The uproar grew louder, and presently there was a sharp cracking sound, and some of the glass in the room broke and one fell onto the floor. That was getting sort of close. He's a shrapnel, said
I'm
Rosemary.
glad he's out of the way.
We don't have much
Scary.
because the air resistance stops that.
It's college grad. What's going on, college
Sorry,
grad?
Lenny. That's okay. I
Morning.
hope to fix people up. I'll have some new cases in the morning. Or tonight, I hope, dear. It's me, Lenny. If we're going to die, let it be that way. The uproar died away even more suddenly than it had come.
I need to read a book on how to
Early in the
play.
mist, when he got it, Lenny found a fragment of a shell near the broken window. It wasn't much more than an inch square, but had unpleasantly jagged edges. He said, LL, keep it for a souvenir, unless you want it. You get plenty of them, replied the student nurse. If it's a bug. You do, of course, that the British are using most shrapnel. LL, see if my father can tell. He gathered up the pieces and used them again, exclaimed Rosemary. That was the casual way. She told him to phone her or wire her as to when he would be sailing.
Toasty's pretty
She didn't know if
fearsome
she could get
too.
enough, but she would try. They went
Thumper,
outside,
huh?
heard
Just
newsboys
so-
shouting, and saw posters in large letters.
I always wonder if
Essay.
Thumper is
In war,
the Where's
there are
Thumper
joys.
on Pirate Bay.
While the South of gunmakers had been gathering rosebuds with the
there's
grand
a
royal
pirate.
Lower Uther, the Senate of the United
It's a
States had
lot
voted the
of
declaration to the effect that a condition of war already existed between that country and Germany.
Hey, are you the
It was a
Thumper
pleasant
of
time to
Pirate
be in
Bay?
London. There were celebrations in the streets, and the usually self-contained islanders were hinting for some American, so that they could shake them by the hand and say, "Thanks, old chap, this is great. All brothers out." And
See, you
when
say their name and all of a sudden
when he asked his father if his company could name contracts.
it's like
He said
the
he
devil.
expected to give the patents, no, but no such instructions had come from Newcastle, Connecticut. Then he went to call Onina Putney, still a student from college despite not being married. He took her to lunch, and they had a long talk. She was a brunette, slender and delicate, with sensitive, finely cut features. She seemed more like a French girl than an English one. She was like eager and somewhat impetuous. She said what she felt, and then perhaps wished she had. The two could get along easily, because they shared the same adoration, and wanted to talk about it. Nina told about her meeting with the most wonderful of would-be flyers, whose dream had since come true. He might be in there, but this letter might be a death blow with one of the German fighters, so light and fast because they were made of aluminum manufactured in Switzerland from fresh bauxite. Lenny didn't tell the young bride about that. But a shadow hung over the meeting, and what could he say? He couldn't deny the mortal danger, or that it would last, day after day.
And
No pressure, but Nana came back alive, because he would be going out again so soon. Business as usual. Lenny and Nina promised to write to each other, for Rick's sake, and she would tell him whatever news she got. That would hurry up, and Miss Bethel would be one, and they would all lie happy ever
Toaster.
after. So, goodbye, Nina, and take good care of that baby, and your toilet basket, and remember, Buds will stand back of you. Robbie said he'd have all his affairs wound up in a couple of days, and no wish to
Ouch.
linger and be a target even for
Oh
a trap.
no.
He had engaged a stateroom.
Jump
and
jives
the
up
lady
here?
killer might gather as many rosebuds as possible
Holy
in that
hell.
England. He phoned to Rosemary, and she said, yes.
Go
she'd
away.
get away once more, even if they find
Hey.
out more.
Yeah, that's what
The same
exactly what I
the
want you
same
to do.
clean of glass patch
Yeah,
with brown
good,
paper.
good, good, good.
Once
Stand
more
right
she
there.
went happy,
That's
after
good.
the
And
fashion
I'm
that
gonna
more
get in
women say were
position
beautiful.
here. Oh no.
Concentrating on one woman, refusing to let the mind roll ahead.
If you don't mind,
In the morning.
hey, could you just, yeah, stay up there. That's right. Alright, I'm just gonna move over here.
And let me know how things go. And they'll do the
Somebody is shooting at me. Hey,
same. She would talk about marriage.
you
She
still
would go on
won.
patching broken English bodies, and he would visit one of his fathers, and come back as a soldier, or perhaps to
Wow.
celebrate the crusade.
Touche, guys. You noticed
And you help us to
it
win.
was a sniper.
So Lanny was through. And it was a good time.
Came after him.
The British were beginning their
job.
spring offensive, which would be drowned in mud and hung on barbed
I
wire and
respect
mowed down by machine guns in the usually depressing way. The French had a new commander, Nivelle, and he would lead them into a slaughter that would bring the troops to the verge of mutiny. away from all that. They took a boat train at night, and went on board a steamship in darkness and silence. They knew they were being towed out into a harbor, and that tugs were pulling steel nets with buoys out of the way. But they couldn't see a thing, because the deck was covered with a shroud of burlap. They sat outside for a long while, listening to the sounds of the sea and conversing in whispers. Not much chance to sleep, and nothing you could do. Everyone tried hard to seem unconcerned. Some men shut themselves up in their cabins and drank themselves insensitive. Others played cards in the saloon and pretended not to care about death. As to where the Star of Empire takes its way, said Robbie. He was telling his son that they were off to God's country, the place to stay in, to believe in. He was telling him not to miss the granddaughter of an earl too much. There were plenty of delightful democratic maidens at home. He was saying that Europe was worn out. It would owe all its money to America, and
Chris,
would be
stop.
fun.
Oh no.
Yes, they were sitting on it by chance there should come a pale streak of foam out there on the starlit ocean, and a shattering explosion beneath them. Book 4. Land of the Pilgrim's Pride. 19. Old Colonial. I. The city of Newcastle, Connecticut, lies at the mouth of the Newcastle River, and has a comfortable harbor, not muddy except in springtime. It has a highway bridge across the harbor, and beyond it a railroad bridge, both having runs so that ships may go up. The Bud plant lies above the bridges, and has a railroad spur running into it. Above the plant are salt marshes, which the progenitor of a family had the forethought to buy for a few dollars an acre. Everyone called him crazy at the time, but as a result of his forethought, his descendants held the land in windings by the simple process
Try
of
not to
steam
get
engine
killed.
into the Martian pile of earth on both sides. In the year 1917, the bought an acre of the salt marsh for $10,000. As a result,
Well, that's what Coach Jones
which meant that
Ouch.
were higher than the class districts
Stop
created.
with that.
Families who settled in farms
There
and
goes all my
ranches
heat.
sold them and moved away and been forgotten, or else they had leased the land, in which case they constituted the aristocracy of Newcastle, owning stock in banks and department stores, water and gas and electric companies, street railways and telephones. As a further result, Newcastle had remained a small city, and many of the workers in Buds lived in nearby towns and came to the point from rural cars. In fact, only a small part of Buds itself was at Newcastle. Farther up the river were dams, and here the company made cartridges and fuses. The dams had locks, and motor barges to haul materials up and brought finished products down. This enabled Lanny's grandfather to say that he disapproved of the modern tendency for congestion in great cities. Also, it enabled him to get much cheaper labor.
Oh.
In the state of Ohio, once known as the Eastern Reserve and settled largely by people from Connecticut,
Whoa.
was the powder plant.
Long arm
In
A.
the state of Massachusetts,
I wonder what what kind of damage mine does.
the concern having gone into
Hey,
bankruptcy.
what are you doing
competition
over here,
forced the Carolinas.
taser boy?
This plant was now making hand grenades. In somewhat smaller
Just
plastic
go ahead,
packages,
just go ahead, go ahead. You know you want to taser. I hate a taser.
of machine guns.
Hate a taser.
The government was
You
advancing
know
money
how much I hate a
to
taser. I really don't like tasers.
All these deals had been arranged
I'm
as they
against
were
it.
business, and many contracts were signed before war had been declared or funds voted by Congress. By the time Lenny arrived in Newcastle,
Good, take him out. There he goes. There he goes.
working day and night, talking about nothing but the war and the contribution they were making to it.
Shall not
Many
stand.
everyone in the town was in the same mental state, and this afforded an opportunity for a stranger to slip in unobserved and have time to adjust himself to an unknown world. Nobody would bother him. Indeed, unless he made a noise, they would hardly know he was there. Aye. Until recently, Ronnie and his family had occupied an old colonial house in the residential part of Newcastle. But there was a transformation going on all over New England. Motor cars had become so dependable, and flat surface roads so good, that it was getting to be the fashion to buy a farm and turn it into a country estate. Your friends did the same, and collectively built a country club with a golf course, and thus had the advantages of town and country life. You got what advantages, goals, and ores. You produced
Oh,
millions
I
of
got
trees
you
and
guys.
asparagus.
Bunch of
You
them.
were called an inland farmer, and not merely had fresh air, space, privacy, but you tried to make it pay.
That's
And
my
if you
revenge
succeeded,
for
you
a
bragged to all your
taser.
friends. The population of such districts consisted of entry, and a great number of tenants and servants, all contented and respectable, and all voting for it, though it was called Republican. What Lanny saw of you turned out to be much like old England. The
Hey, he's coming with a taser again. Get away from me with a taser. I don't want to die with a taser.
Walls and small streams with real dams, and old farmhouses and churches that were shown as landmarks.
Blaze.
Some of the trees were different. High-arching white elms and flowering dogwood soon to be in party costume.
Good job.
Also, the dialect of the
Oops.
people was different, but these were details.
Good
The
job.
house stood at the head of an archway of elms more than 100 years old. The farmhouse originally on the spot had been moved to one side and made into a garage with
Cash
shelters
out.
and gardeners'
Cash
quarters above.
out.
A new house had
Where's
been
this
built,
guy?
modern inside, but keeping the LD colonial pattern.
Help.
It had 2 stories and a
You
half.
shouldn't be up
One
here.
was called an angle roof, starting at a steep pitch, and walking down halfway, finishing at a flatter pitch. In front of the house were big white columns which made up the second story. At one side were smaller columns over a porte cochere. Inside, the house was clean, everything painted white. The furniture was of a sort Lanny had never seen before. He also was spoken Colonial, and he was to hear conversation about it, and learn the difference between boys and boys, and what her cover was, and chair, and all in cologne. Everything in the house had its proper place and knew that was bad manners. This had been explained to Lanny by his father. Ezra had strict ideas of propriety. He should not play the piano loudly, at least not without asking if he would disturb anyone. He would make things easier if he would go to church with the family. Above all, he must be careful not to speak plainly about anything having to do with the relationship of men and women. Esther tried her best to be elder, but she's just good, and it was better not to put any strain upon her. Lanny promised. Aye. The seen pictures of her, so he knew her when he saw her standing at the head of the stairs, with the big grandfather's clock behind her. It was an important moment for her as well as for him, and both of them realized it. She was becoming a stepmother, one of the most difficult of human relationships. She was taking a stranger into a perfectly ordered home, one from a culture foreign to hers and greatly suspected. He was young and he was weak, yet he had a power which could not be disregarded, having entered her husband's life ahead of her and sunk deep roots into his heart. Esther Remsen Budd was 35 at this time. She was a daughter of the president of the First National Bank of Newcastle, a Budd institution. She had lived most of her life in the town, and her ideas of Europe were derived from a summer of travel with teachers and members of the class at a young ladies finishing school. She was one of the most conscientious of women, and gave earnest thought to being just and upright. She was not cold, but made herself seem so by subjecting to careful consideration everything she did and said. She was charitable, and acted in the affairs of the First Congregational Church, in which her father-in-law taught the men's Bible class every Sunday morning. She guided her 3 children lovingly but strictly, and did her best to use wisely the powers which wealth and social position gave her. To Esther at the age of 21, Robbie Budd had been a figure of romance. He met her frequently, met informally, and came on contracts, with a hope of then becoming hardly a person in that town to prosper except as Budd's prospered, and when Robbie sold automatics to Romania.
That's a guy I like to get out.
Esther's father bought her an electric coupe, a sort of showcase to drive about town in. Everybody
Sure,
wanted her to marry Robbie. Most of the rules had tried and failed, and knew there was some mystery, some story of a
That's
broken
not
heart.
gonna work.
The time came when Robbie took Esther for a long drive and told her about the mysterious women in France. Artists model who had been painted in the nude by several mean and strange kind of promiscuity, wholly outside the possibilities of Newcastle, which
It's
still
the
appears in village.
McLarge huge in the flesh.
He was then about 5 years old. He had done so because he saw it break apart his father's life. He could not possibly get into the lessons imparted to the men's Bible class. Robbie would ask
Change of
Esther to
heart?
marry him,
Is that what
but
she
only
had?
after she knew about the situation, and understood that he had a son and would not disown him. The two families were working busily to make this match. Did the president of Buds give his claim, the president of the First National Bank,
Hank it?
some hint of the problem? Or did the latter guess what might have happened to a handsome and wealthy young businessman from Paris? Anyhow, Esther's father had a talk with her, of a sort unusual in Puritan New England. He told her that his life was concerning future husbands. Among the so-called eligible men of the town, those slightly older than herself unable to support her in the position to which she had been accustomed,
The
she had
fierce.
difficulty in finding one who had not had to do with someone. The difference between Robbie Budd and most others was that they didn't consider it necessary to tell their future brides about the wild oats they had sown. Esther asked for time to think all this over, and in the end she and Robbie were married. It had been 13 years now, and they had 3 children, and Esther was as near to happiness as any of the Al matrons she knew. Robbie played golf while his wife went to church, and he drank more liquor than she considered wise. When he was indifferent to the charms of the country club seductresses, he let her have her way entirely with the children, and he gave her more money than she had use for. On the whole, she could count herself a fortunate wife. But now came this one wild oat of her husband, to be transplanted into her garden and to grow there. She was compelled against the circumstances which had brought this about. If he was going into the army, it obviously ought to be the American army. And if he came to America, and was denied his father's home, that would be a repudiation and an affront. To say that Robbie had had a previous marriage in France was one of those conventional lies that were hardly lies at all. Women would smile behind their
Glad
veils.
we're on the
and smile.
team together.
But after all, there has to be a statute of limitations on scandals. IV. So Esther was
I
standing at
love
the top of the
Collins.
long staircase
I always
with
think I love
grandfather's clock
Collins.
behind her. She was tall and rather slender.
This is a girly
She
thing.
held herself erect, and was quiet and grave in manner.
I don't know.
She had straight brown hair, drawn back from a high forehead in defiance of fashion's edicts. Her nose was a little too long and thin, but the rest of her features were regular and her smile kindly. Her brown eyes appraised Lenny, and she kissed him on the cheek. She had made up her just mind that she was going to treat him exactly like her own children, and Robbie had told Lenny that he was to call her other. She took him into her sitting room to get acquainted. He liked to talk, and was eager and friendly about it. He had been on a steamship which had been in peril of the submarines. He told how the passengers had behaved when they had struck a floating ice cake. He had been in London where it was bombed, and had a bit of shrapnel which had come through the window of a hotel room. Of course he didn't say who had been in that room with him. Esther, listening and watching, decided that he was intelligent, and if anything went wrong it could be explained to him. The load upon her mind grew lighter. She took him to his room.
Mortifly.
It was small, but had its own bath.
Mortifly.
The walls
Mortifly.
were of pale blue, and the blankets on a single bed were the same. The rug in front of it was made by winding the long soft rope of braided rags into a spiral. His new mother explained that this was an umbrella, and was an antique. She showed him the ivory in which he was to keep his shirts and such belongings. Esther knew the story of each old piece of furniture, which she had picked up on trips he lived now in the country. Each of these adventures was important to her. As an art lover, Lenny could see that the pieces were well proportioned, and they must have been well made to be in use after 100 years. Outside it was warm, and the window of the room was open. There was a cherry tree close by, getting ready to bloom. A bird was singing in it.
Did it all for you, Flash Girl.
And Lenny commented on this. Esther said it was a mockingbird which came every season, and had arrived only a few days ago. Not many of them reached New England. Lenny told
That's
about
Angel
the
Palmer,
which made its nest in
House's
the court
guy.
at the menu, and was treated as a member of the
Take it
family.
out on your shelf.
He had tried to write out all the notes it had sung,
now your
and now he
shelf's
would do the same for the mockingbird. His new mother said this task would keep him busy. The
not
mockingbird
his
said,
job.
"Turkey, turkey, turkey, turkey." Then he stopped his coffee to left and said, "You may. You may. You
I'm
may."
just helping you learn that your
4
shield
months
is
thereafter,
hanging
one of
on.
Lenny's adventures would be meeting his relatives.
Every
first
You're
came
just
to
gonna
have
sit
brothers
there,
who
somebody
attended a
picks
private school in town, and were taken every morning and called for in the afternoon. Robert Jr. was 12, and Percy 11. They were handsome boys, who knew how to move quietly about a well-ordered home. Of course they were curious about this new rival from foreign parts.
That looks like an Aries with no shield out. Full magazine. Yeah, and blue steel, yeah.
Shepherd dog, which they
See
called
your,
Forrest dog, and which Lenny knew as an Alsatian.
Didn't push your shield
Prince
out.
was formally introduced, and looked the newcomer over warily, smelled him thoroughly, and finally wagged his tail. That was important. Then came Bess, who was 9. Her school was nearby, but she had a singing lesson that afternoon, and the chauffeur went for her after he had brought boys. Bess was like her mother, tall for her years and slender, with a skin thin nose and silver brown eyes. But she had not yet learned restraint.
Flash goes around the Panther.
When she heard that
I
Lenny headed
think.
toward the submarines where she cried, H, tell us about it. She hung on every word, and Lenny found himself a young Marco Polo. H, what did you do? And, how did you say? And, aren't you dreadfully frightened? Lenny knew that this one child pictured his sister. She asked him questions about the city and what he did there. About the world, the people he knew who had been there. About the Christmas of the castle in Germany. About Greece, and the ruins,
more
first teachers in her school. About England,
Help.
and the boat race, and the blue girl who hadn't had enough to eat, and India, who at this moment might be up in the air shooting at German planes with a machine gun was made by boats. Not one detail escaped her. She would think that if he left anything out the next time she told the story. And the teller became her hero, her idol. It was a case of love at
Not
first sight.
wait to put him
He played
down.
the piano for her. He showed her how to dance
Wow,
and cruise.
not
Taught her
put
the
him
words
down.
of old songs.
Yeah,
He
put
made
him
the
down.
French language come alive for her.
Kill that dog.
You know, in this future, when Bessie Love first had to admit that this wonderful
Put
power
him
of
to
hers was
sleep.
less than perfect with marked the tragedies of her stormy life. P.I.
Ouch.
Comically different was Lanny's first meeting with his grandfather, Samuel Budd, which took
Ruin
place
my
right on the
shield.
second
Oh.
evening after his arrival.
Expose over here
Robbie
too.
escorted him to the old gentleman's home.
Fight him, would you?
Impossible to subject the youth to such
Do
an
you
ordeal
mind,
alone.
Flash Girl?
On the way, the father told him what to do. Not to talk too much, but to answer questions
coming.
politely and listen attentively.
Don't
It
die.
would have been better for me if I had always followed those rules, he said, with a trace of bitterness. Robbie was driving, they were alone. So he could speak frankly.
Thanks.
It was time
See,
to do so.
Flash Girl, again,
circumstances
once
have made
again,
them,
Flash
and they don't
Girl
change very much
stepped
after
in
they've
right
grown.
when I was
Your
in my
grandfather
most
is a stubborn
vulnerable
person,
moment.
as much so as the brick
She-
on which this house is built, and
she
you might as
stepped
well
up
let
to
your
the
dad dance
plate.
with the other. Don't want to
And then we got
said
the
woman,
kill,
both
'cause-
amused and worried. Tell me exactly what to do. Al, the first thing
Urban
is to get
assist.
clear that you are the fruit of sin. From this remark, Lenny
Thanks,
realized that the
Flash
quarrel which had wrecked his mother's life and separated him from his father was still going on, and that the wounds of it were festering in Robbie's heart. Purely, the youth protested. He can blame me for what happened then. He will tell you about visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children into the 3rd and 4th generation. Holmes says that Robbie sees somewhere in the Old Testament. Lenny thought and then asked, us, what does he want me to do? He'll tell you that himself. All you have to do is to listen. Another pause. Finally the son was moved to say, suppose he didn't want me to come to Newcastle? He has agreed to accept me as one of his grandsons. And I think it is important that he should be made to do it. Al, whatever you say. I want to please you. But if you're doing it for my sake, you don't have to. And do it for my own, said the other. Really? He's been so many years,
Pirate Day.
Robbie. Doesn't that count with him at all?
Go 30,000.
In the sight of the Lord 1,000 years are as a day. Most of the persons Lanny had met in his young life never said anything about the Lord, except as a metaphor or expletive. Several had said in his hearing that they didn't believe any such being existed. But now the thought came to Lanny that his father differed from these persons. Robbie believed that the Lord existed, and he didn't like it. PII. The president of a gunmakers corporation had been born in a red brick mansion on the Residence Boulevard which skirted the edge of Newcastle. He had lived in it all his life, and meant to die in it, regardless of automobiles, country clubs, and other changes of fashion. His butler had been his father's butler, and wasn't going to be changed, even though he was becoming tottery. There were electric lights in the house, but they were hung in old chandeliers. The hand-carved French walnut bookcases were oiled and polished until they shone, and behind their glass doors Lenny caught glimpses of books which he would have liked to examine. He knew this was a very old mansion, and that political as well as business history had been made in it. But it seemed strangely ugly and depressing. The master was in his study, the ancient butler said, and Robbie led his son at once to a room. At a desk absorbed in some papers sat a man of 70, solidly built and heavy, as if he did not exercise. Partly bald, and having a considerable tuft of whitish gray hair underneath his chin, a style which Lanny had never seen before. He wore gold spectacles, and had creases between his heavy gray eyebrows, which gave him a stern expression, cultivated perhaps for business purposes. From his desk it appeared that he had carried home with him the burden of winning a award. Al, young man, he said, looking up. He did not rise, and apparently didn't plan even to shake hands. But to Lanny it seemed that a gentleman ought to shake hands with his grandfather when he met him for the first time. So he went straight to the desk and held out his hand, forcing the other to take it. Oh, do you do, grandfather? He said. And as the answer appeared to come slowly he went on, I've heard a great deal about you, and I'm happy to meet you at last. Thank you, said the old gentleman, surprised by this cordiality. Everybody has been most kind to me, grandfather, continued Lanny, as if he thought his progenitor might be worrying about it. I'm glad, said the other. Lenny, and so did the old man. They gazed at each other, a sort of duel of eyes. Robbie had told him not to talk. But something came to Lanny suddenly, a sort of inspiration. This old munitions maker wasn't happy. He had to live in an ugly old house and be burdened day and night with cares. He had an enormous lot of power which other people were trying to get away from him, and that made him suspicious. It forced him to be hard. But he wasn't hard. Underneath, he was kind, and all you had to do was be kind to him, and not ask anything from him. Lenny decided to follow that much.
Put my shield down
He
right
announced
quick
that
then,
I'm
yeah?
going to like America very much. I like England, and
So.
I'm surprised to find everything here so much like England. Indeed, young man, the best part of England, I mean. I hope I shan't see anything like their terrible slums. The elderly industrialist rose to the bait. Her working people are getting double wages now. You will see them wearing silk socks and shirts, and buying themselves cars on the installment plan. They will soon be our masters. It was told to see in England, sir. People complain about the taxes there. The owners of the great estates say that they are going to have to break them up. Do you think that will happen in this country? Apparently we plan to finance our share of the war by means of loans, replied the president of Bugs. It is a dangerous procedure. Zanarov talked about that. He doesn't seem to object to war loans of any size. Maybe it is because he is getting so large a share of the proceeds. Yeah. Yes, said the grandfather. I'm happy to say that Buds have not conducted their affairs on the same fly-by-night basis as Zanarov. The part of the conversation is highly esteemed in France, and when we had acquired it, he had heard the Lord wise Davis the monster declare that the one certain way to interest a man was to get him to talking about his own affairs. A beginning having been made in this case, Lenny went on to remark, find that Buds have a very good reputation abroad, sir. Oh. They want our products just now. Yes, sir. But I mean with persons who are disinterested. Oh, for example, L. M. Rochambeau. He spent a good part of his life in the Swiss diplomatic service, so he's very well informed.
My shield.
He has been most helpful to me during the 2.5 years that I haven't been seeing Robbie. Anything I didn't understand about world affairs, he was always kind enough to explain to me. You were fortunate. S. Grandfather. Before that there was M. Pretu, the librarian at Mrs. Chattersworth C.H. Tow. He helped form my library. And books did he give you, may I ask? Taylor and Molly, Cornel Racine, and of course Moby May. L.L. French writers, said the deacon of the First Congregational Church. I inquire whether any of your advisors ever mentioned the book called the Bible. H. Yes, sir. And Rochambeau told me that I should study the New Testament. I had some difficulty in finding a copy on the Riviera. And you read it? Very word of it, sir. And what did you get out of it? He moved me deeply. In fact, it made me cry 4 different times. You know, it tells the same story 4 times over. I'm aware of it, said the old gentleman, driving. Have you read the Old Testament? Oh, sir. That is one of the unfortunate gaps in my education. They tell me you are conducting a Bible class. Very Sunday morning at 10 o'clock. I'm dealing with the first book of Samuel, and would be pleased to have my grandson come over. Thank you. I will surely come. And Rochambeau tells me that the best Jewish literature is found in the Old Testament. It is much more than Jewish literature, young man. Do not forget that it is the word of Almighty God, your Heavenly Father. VII. All that time Robbie Budd had been sitting in silence, occupied with keeping his emotions from showing in his face. Of course he knew that this youngster had had a lot of practice in dealing with elderly gentlemen. Colonels and generals, cabinet ministers, senators, diplomats, bankers, they had come to Benvenu, and sometimes it had happened that a boy had to make conversation until his mother got her nose powdered. Or perhaps he had taken them for a sail, or for a walk, to show them the charms of the cap. All this expense he had now put to use, apparently with success. For here sat the leader of the men's Bible class of the First Congregational Church of Newcastle, Connecticut, who was supposed to be saving the world for democracy, and had before him a portfolio of important papers contributory to that end. But he put his heavy fist on them, and set to work to save the soul of a 17-year-old master from a sunny heathen part of the world where you had difficulty in finding a copy of the sacred word of God. To this almost lost soul he explained that the scripture was a source, not merely of church doctrine, but of church polity. And the officers of the church, including the are to be thought of as exemplars of Christian doctrine, from whom others might understand the nature of conversion and the reality of salvation. The deacon reached into the corner of his desk and produced a small pamphlet, yellow with age, entitled A Brief Digest of the Boston Confession of Faith.
I'm gonna die.
This, said he, is composed by your great-great-grandfather for popular use as a simple statement of our basic faith. In it you will find clearly set forth that central truth of our religion. There is no salvation save in the light of the cross. For that gift incurred by Adam so has tormented humanity together with the colossal iniquity of the accumulated sins through the ages has made all men hopelessly evil in God's sight, and deserving whose just punishment of spiritual death. Outraged by human sin, the wrath of God is only that appeased by the atoning blood shed by his Son upon the cross, and only by faith in the blood of Christ can any man find salvation. No righteousness of life, no good deeds or kindly words, no service of fellow men can offer any hope of salvation. It is believed in that redeeming blood poured out on Calvary that alone can win God's forgiveness and save us from eternal death. I recommend the pamphlet as your introduction to the study of the truth of gospel. Grandfather, said Lenny. He was deeply impressed.
Oh, yeah.
As in the case of Kurt explaining the intricacies of German philosophy, Lenny could not be sure how many of these striking ideas had been created by his remarkable
40%
progenitors.
team kills. What are you
Having thus
doing,
performed his duty as a guardian of sound
donut
doctrine, the old
parlor or
gentleman allowed
something
himself
up
to
there?
Our father tells me that you had a pleasant voyage. H. Yes, replied the youth, brightening. T couldn't have been pleasant except for the collision with an iceberg. Did Robbie tell you about that? He overlooked it. T was such a small iceberg, I suppose it would be better to speak of it as a cake of ice. But it gave us quite a bump, and the ship came to a stop. Of course, everybody's mind had been on submarines from the moment we left England, so they all thought we had been torpedoed, and there was a panic among the passengers. Indeed. The strangest thing you can imagine, sir. I never saw people behave like that before. The women became hysterical, especially those in the third class. Those that had babies grabbed them up and rushed into the first class saloon, and they all piled their babies in the middle of the floor.
It's
No one
lovely
could imagine
legs.
why they did that. I
She's
asked
on
some
my
of them
team.
afterwards, and they said they didn't know. Some woman put her baby there,
Come
and the
on,
rest
here,
of them
let's
thought that
go.
must be the place for babies, so they laid them down there, and the babies were
No,
all
I'm just
squalling
kidding.
and were
I'm
screaming,
joking.
some of them on their knees praying,
I'm not
and some
done.
crying
I'm
for the
married.
officers to say there's so much noise that the officers couldn't tell them that it
But
was
I'm
all
just thinking of
Curious
your
experience.
lovely,
And now, young man, may I ask what you plan to do with yourself in this new country? Your
lovely
late
legs.
grandfather. Robbie wishes me to prepare for St. Thomas's, and he's going to get me a tutor. Oh, you really intend to work? Always work hard when I get down to it. I wanted to be able to read music at sight, and I have stayed at it until I can read most anything. These are serious times, and few of us have time for music. I'm going to learn whatever my tutor wishes, grandfather. Very well. I'll look to hear your reports. There was a pause. Then the old man turned to his son. Albert, said he, we've been looking into this Canadian contract, and it strikes me as a plain holdout. Holdout, said Robbie. But we're getting our cost plus 10%, so we don't have to worry. Don't like to pass a swindle like this onto the government. Al, the dealers have their story. Everybody's holding up everybody all along the line. Think you'd better go down to New York and inquire around. If you say so. I have to go anyhow, on account of the new bomb site design. He seems to be standing the tests. They went on for quite a while, talking technical details. Lenny was used to such talk, and managed to learn something. In this case, he learned that an elderly businessman who got his church doctorate in polity from 1800 years ago, and his two whiskers and chandeliers from at least 100 years
you
ago,
are dry.
would change a bomb
Just
site
sit
while performing the
there.
Forest algorithm among
What
his
you
research
doing?
and showed him evidence of an improvement. At last, the grandfather said, LL right. I have to get back to work. We're carrying too much of a load, father, ventured Robbie. We want to leave some of these decisions to us young fellows. He'll be able to keep before long. I'll hold up this Canadian deal for a day, and you run up to New York. Goodbye, young man. This Delaney and DC that you come to my Bible class. Great, grandfather, replied the youth. But already the elder's eyes were turning toward that pile of papers on his desk. The other two went out and got into the car, and Robbie started to drive. Lenny waited for him to speak. Then he discovered that the vibration of the seat was not from the engine, but was his father shaking with laughter. Did I do the right thing, Robbie? Great, kid, perfectly grand. Robbie shook some more, and then asked, whatever put it into your head to talk? Did I say too much? He was having a conversation, but what made you think of it? Al, I'll tell you. I just decided that people aren't heading up to each other. The father thought that over. It was worth trying, he admitted. 20. The Pierian Spring. Norman Henry Harper was the name of Lanny's tutor. He didn't in the least resemble the elegant and easygoing Mr. Alfonso, nor yet the happy-go-lucky Jerry Pendleton. He was a professional man, and performed his duties with dignity. He prepared young men to pass examinations. He already knew about the examinations. He found out about each young man as quickly as possible, and then, presto A plus B equals CTH each young man who passed the examination. To the resolution of this formula, Mr. Harper devoted his exclusive attention. His equipment and procedure were streamlined, constructed on scientific principles, his much so as by machine gun. Nor was this comparison fantastic. On the contrary, the more you consider it, the more evidence it appeared. Experts from military studies have been writing predictions about the perpetual war going on between gun makers and armor plate makers. And in the same way there were educators, whose business it was to cram knowledge into the minds of youth, and there was youth, perversely resisting this process, seeking every device to get by. The educators had invented examinations, and the students were trying to circumvent them. Being provided by the parents with large sums of money, it was natural that they should use it to get expert help in this never-ceasing war. And so had developed the profession of tutoring. This was America that Lanny had come to live in, and he wanted to know all about it. He listened to what Mr. Harper said, and afterwards put his mind on it and tried to figure out what it meant. A young man wanted to get into rep school as quickly as possible, in order that he might get through rep school as quickly as possible, in order that he might get into college as quickly as possible, in order that he might get out of college as quickly as possible. Mr. Harper didn't say any of it for the reason that it didn't need saying. If it wasn't so, what was he here for? Mr. Harper was about 40 years of age, a brisk and business-like person who might have been one of the bus salesmen. He was getting bald, and plastered wet hairs were let very carefully over the top of his head. For about half his life he had been studying college entrance examinations. It would be an exaggeration to say that he could tell you every question which had been asked in any college of the United States during 20 years. But his knowledge approached that encyclopedic character. He knew the personalities of the different professors, and what exam questions they had used for the last few years, and so he could make a pretty good guess what questions were due for another term. He would hold up his hand in the middle of a conversation. No, you used to know that. They never asked anything like that. Just recently had come a revolution in Mr. Harper's profession. The educational authorities had got together and set up what they called the College Entrance Examination Board, which was going to hold uniform examinations all over the country, good for any college a student might select. There were 250,000 college students, and 6 times as many high school students, so of course they had to be handled on a mass production basis. It was part of the process of standardizing America. Everybody was eating cornflakes out of the same kind of package, and all students of the year 1917 were going to get into college because they had read Washington Irving's Alhambra and George Washington's farewell address. Ladybug was, so Mr. Harper declared, the most complicated problem he had ever tackled. He became quite enthusiastic over him, like a surgeon over an abdominal tumor with fascinating complications. From the point of view of the college entrance examination board, Lady quite literally didn't know anything. One by one the youth brought his bird offerings and his wave offerings to the educational high priest and saw them rejected. Music? No, there are no credits for music. Greek?
This is a big book. What I'm doing is I'm getting ready to get off. Need to go check on my daughter, and we'll try to get back on as soon as we can. Take care. Thanks for tuning in, and until next time, keep battling Japanese robots.